My Mom and I. Please, real story animated. Make my story animated. Hi, I'm Tiffany, and I'm almost 17, and I'm fun to be with, like adventures, and in my melancholic nature, I love taking risks. But I don't tolerate it when I'm underrated or intimidated. I love my parents, honestly. The open secret remains that their incompatibility is nothing good to write home about. And that's what kills my joy most times. Dad has always complained about Mom's infidelity in their marriage. The last straw that broke the camel's back was on one fateful day I was right in my room while I believed that Mom had already gone to bed. And for all we know, Dad was gone for a business trip in Australia, and we expected his arrival in 2 days' time. Suddenly, I began to hear a manly voice in Mom's room. Could Dad have come back by this time? Oh no! I called Dad's line, and his autoresponder responded that he was in a meeting. That means Dad isn't in town. Then who is this man that I'm hearing his voice in Mom's room? Then, in my suspense mood, I drew nearer to Mom's door to hear this voice better, and lo, it was the black bug guy I normally see Mom drop off whenever she came to pick me up from school. Oh, really? I guess she decided to bring this big guy, Mr. Frank, home tonight, because the dad isn't at home. I can hear the romantic voices and actions, unlike Dad, who isn't perfectly romantic. I started peeping through the door handle. I could not believe my eyes. As cool as the evening was, Mom's body was so inviting to Mr. Frank that he couldn't hold his emotions anymore. And then he made a move towards her. Suddenly, they were already floating on the cloud, gazing into each other's eyes. Frank gently pulls her so close to his daring heart, hoping they do not part ways even for a second. As Mom wrapped in his arms, imagining them taking a journey into time together, breathing passionate words of love into his ears. Like a bolt from the blues, his fingertips stroke softly throughout her hair with such divine affection and care. Frank's body, creating heat of passion, building within, emitting vibes that erupt deep down her gentle soul, and wrap her in his arms, imagining eternity. As he felt the smoothness of her skin, his mind fantasized as their bodies interlocked in the sea of emotions, creating much energy and passion, heating up deep down their souls. The response was too real for Mom to believe this is happening to him. I can see that from Mom's body language. She softly said to him, "Frankie, come and be lost within me forever. I feel myself being a part of you from the onset. That I dragged you into the car has been all about Frank inside my mind, and the seconds fleet into minutes, minutes ticking into hours, and the hours clicking into eternity. It's just a fantasy with such a wonderful design as we both float downstream to where we could be." He kissed her so passionately, holding out dreams of daring chances as I feel like flying on angel's wings with you. Frank whispered to her succulent ears, just as the cool morning breeze gathers where shadows will be at sunrise. He held her hands with lips locked in unison until they stroll into the path of scented bliss, till the dream ends in the terrestrial sky before the cock crows. Oh my goodness, I realize that I've actually been stooping all night in front of Mom's door, following every bit of their moves. I was lucky enough. It was a Saturday morning, and I dozed back to my room because my sleep was actually deprived of me by the 2 lovebirds. With the look of things, Mom seems to feel very much safe and cared for with Mr. Frank. Then I began to understand what the bone of contention may be in my parents' soured relationship. Mom really needed a man to care for her and treat her like a queen she is, and not business conference today, business meeting tomorrow. That fateful Saturday morning, I was woken up by the shouts and voices of grievances and anger. And I heard my dad's voice very clear, roaring like a lion, just as usual whenever he is scolding at Mom. I was getting confused more this time. Did I mistake Dad for Mr. Frank? Just as usual, I crept out of my room. This time, Mom's room was not locked. It was wide open. No, it can't be. I have never seen Mom and Dad in such atmosphere of emotions and bond before. When I came close to her room, I saw him. It was Dad. I greeted both, and of course, I didn't expect them to respond to my greetings anyway. They continued in exchanging words. Then I knew there is a fire on the mountain because Dad came back with an early morning flight. He said on getting to Australia, the meeting was held in a jiffy, and he had to make his way back to the state. Then I heard Mom screaming, "Go, go, go!" I'm tired and fed up with all these. It's over between us. That was how Mom and Dad got separated. Then, according to the law, I live with my mom till date believing that someday a miracle will happen and both of them will come together again. However, I love my parents. I just needed more. More care, more attention, more love, and more togetherness. Sincerely, when I see other kids together with their parents go on vacations, shopping, sports, and all that, I feel jealous. During my 16th birthday, I wished I could get all I wanted in my parents. The atmosphere was smiling at me as I blow out the candlesticks, standing in front of a gigantic cake with my both parents standing beside me. One on the left and one on the right, and then they both handed over something wrapped in a gift bag. What could it be? I thought aloud. Wow, it's a phone! I mean, 2 different lovely phones. What a birthday! Then the music was rolled, and I danced and danced in my Cinderella pink gown. Unfortunately, it was a dream. How I wish this is not a mere dream, but a reality. But I believe in dreams becoming reality. I believe it will come to pass one day. Oh yes, it is my birthday. How I wish it would be celebrated in a grand style. It is funny because when I turned 16, my mom promised to buy me a phone. I kept reminding her about that until one day a strange event that I couldn't understand. Something happened after turning me around a couple of times, and for my 16th birthday, my dad wanted to buy me a phone, but my mom never wanted to see me with him or allow him to do anything for me. Note that my mom is this type of independent woman. She insisted that she wants to buy it for me, and I was happy because finally I'm going to have my own phone. On my birthday, Mom did not throw any party around for me. All I got was an early morning pat on my back and whispering, "Happy birthday, my little angel. I promise I'm going to get your phone today." Wow! That sounds interesting, and trust me, I kept reminding her that day. "Mom, my phone!" On that day, I waited till evening. The waiting was too long. My mom keeps saying a bit later, but suddenly she asked me to dress up, of which I did, although she was acting as someone who was waiting for somebody until finally she got the call from a colleague which she was waiting for, and we head to shopping. I enjoy driving with Mom, so we went in her car. We passed the store where we should stop and buy the phone. "Mom, that's the shop," I said in excitement. Rather, she apologized that she needed to visit her colleague at the castle. As a child, there are things I don't debate with Mom. We arrive at the colleague's house, and it was a big house. I loved it. He had 3 cars and 2 dogs. Mom knows that I like dogs, so she said to me, "Tiffany, you play with the dogs, and I will get back pretty quick." "Yes, Mom," I responded. I started playing with Japs and Jade. As I was engrossed in the fun, after some time another man with a big black car entered the house, and then comes another one, and after 5 minutes, another one. I was wondering what is going on. My mom came to meet this colleague, and here are 3 more visitors in there, and I'm not seeing my mom coming out. So I decided to go inside, and upon approach, no one was in the living room. It was silence except the weird noise coming from far away, and it sounded like someone is clapping. One door was opened in one of the rooms, but all of the rooms were dark or less lighted, and I came closer and called Mom. No one answered, and then I came even closer, and the clapping sound started increasing. Clap, 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 and sometimes even faster, clap, clap, clap. And then I heard someone saying, "Yeah," and again, clap, clap, clap. And then I heard the voice of Mom saying, "Yeah, yeah, ah, you are good." Then she increased the speed of the exclamation. "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah! Oh, thank you, yeah, yeah, and finally, yes! Let's do it, I thought. This is a fight, or what's going on? At this moment, I called loudly, "Mom, are you okay?" Everything stopped, and they all get out saying, "Yes, let's do it. Congratulations." But then I asked Mom, what was that clapping noise? And all that she said was, I pitched them an idea for a startup business, and yes, they agreed to fund the project. But then one thing that got me thinking was the physical appearance of the 3 men. They were sweating profusely, looking like men that just engaged on a physical combat, sapped of all their energy with this post-ejaculation, their minds numbed down, tired, and walking slowly, gulping down some drink. Immediately we went to the store, but while we were going, I asked her what were those weird noises, and she said it was nothing serious. They were all excited. And yes, I know she was excited because when she got out from that room, she was a bit reddish in her face somehow, and her voice was cracky, because she really shouted so much. My mom also told me not to discuss what happened with anyone for any reason. I knew she was warning me about this because of my dad. He calls me every 2 days to know what's happening around Mom, and she also told me that this need to be kept secret forever. Forever? Why is she holding this event so tight? For me, I see no big deal in it. Oh, but I will adhere to her instructions. With my sense of curiosity, I also asked her, why are all her colleagues men? There is no other female amongst them except you. She responded that they couldn't make it that day, but would come in the next meeting. I'm glad that finally my mom is happy, and she's going to make her dream come true. And I've got a new phone. But what was weird is that my mom never started that business, and now we are almost 1 year from there. This also means that my phone is 1 year old, too. But I hope she will buy me a new one when I turn 17 next week. What do you guys think? What should I do so my mom will buy me a new phone? Please, like this video if you think it was not a business consultation. And leave a comment if you think it was something else going on. Hi, I'm Emma, and I live in a small city where people are not too much because I love to live a low-key life, and I so much love keeping to myself. My parents complained several times about this type of attitude that I've cultivated, but that's just me. So as time goes on, they have to take me for who I am. So they already know the type of girl I am, so they always let me be at all time. I'm so much quiet and reserved. I'm not the type of person who likes games or do too much on the daily activities, but I like reading novels and watching a lot of movies, especially comedy movies, because since I already choose to keep to myself, I have to find a means of catching fun by myself. I attend a high school class where students have the choice to do what they like and want. Whenever I'm in class, I'm always reserved and quiet, always. But I do have friends who always love to force words out of my mouth whenever they are around me. I love going to school every day, if not for anything but for the sake of seeing my friends, because I will surely talk whenever I'm around them. On this beautiful morning when I got to class, I noticed a letter was dropped inside my locker, which was so unusual. I decided to open the letter after the class, but while the teacher was in class teaching, all my mind was on was the letter that was dropped inside my locker. Immediately when the teacher left the class, I opened it, and what I discovered was a love letter, which I did not know who dropped it there. I tried to pay so much attention to every guy I came in contact with in class so as to get who dropped the letter, but it was not too available. After a long period of staying in class during the break hour, my friends came to my seat to meet me, and then they all said we should go outside to get something. On our way out, some guys came our way, and trying to get our attention at first, I looked at all of them, thinking maybe it might be one of them that cultivated the habit of dropping the sticky note inside my locker. But with all their facial expressions, I don't think any of them can do such. They tried stopping us, not moving any step out of there, and all we just have to do is to comply. But all of a sudden, a teacher decided to come our way. Then immediately they noticed that the teacher was coming our way. They all left instantly, and we proceeded in getting what we wanted to go by. I told my friends about the sticky note I discovered inside my locker that morning, and they all laughed at me, saying maybe a guy has been stalking me all this while. They then said that one of us should try coming to school very early so that the guy can be caught. But that guy that dropped the sticky note is just too smart and expert. We tried for days, but we could not get the guy, so I told the ladies to forget the issue, that I'm very sure that one day he will surely reveal his identity. As time goes on, it became a regular routine. Every blessed morning when I get to my seat, I will surely find a sticky note with a love quote inside my locker. At some point, I got annoyed and frustrated, but there's no point yelling because I did not know who was doing such a thing. So I decided to stomach it, and I did not tell it to anyone. One day during school hour, a teacher at school was explaining to us a physics experiment, and he made it as a game because he wanted all the students to participate and be carried along. During this process, all students participating closed their eyes and tasted, perceived, and some liquids to tell what it is based on their taste. It was quite fun because all students were carried along for the first time at school, and we all laughed where someone guessed wrong because we all gave various answers, knowing fully well that our tasting boards are different. I really enjoyed the class that day because it was so much different. The following day in class was Friday, so a group of people in class came together and discussed that we should have a get-together party on Saturday, which is the following day. So they asked the whole class about their opinion concerning the party. To my surprise, everyone was happy to hear that they all turned in. Well, as for me, having a get-together party on Saturday, though the plan was a little bit awkward to me, because I don't really like associating myself with things like that, because I so much love keeping to myself. A venue was picked, and all planned was so fascinating and lovely. Actually, I love the plan because I want to see how it will look for the first time by the beach side, so I decided to hang out that day. When I got home that day, I told my mom about the plan of going to the beach the following day. She was so happy to hear that because she's never seen me going out before. So that night, my mom came into my room and went directly to my wardrobe to select the clothes I will be putting on the following day. When it comes to selecting clothes for an event, my mom is very good at it, and she so much loves me looking good and cute, always. So the day finally came. I woke up so late, maybe because I slept late checking out the clothes my mom was picking for me to wear. I had to rush to the bathroom to have my bath so as to dress up to meet with the event, knowing fully well that I'm late already. After having my bath, I dressed up, looking cute and pretty for the event. After dressing up, I set out for the party immediately. So finally, I got to the venue a little bit late. And trust me, just as planned, all eyes were on me because I was so much looking gorgeous and pretty. After getting there, a guy named Sean in my class ran towards me to give me a long hug and a peck. After he did that, I was so shy to take a step away from where I was standing. But from the look of things, he's been a long-time crush. Throughout the party, Sean was all over me, because that will be the first time he will have the opportunity of talking to me and expressing himself. We both have a walk together, and he told me a lot of things about me which I was so surprised to hear. Then I knew he has been the guy stalking me. Actually, Sean has been the guy dropping all those sticky notes with love quotes under my locker. At first, when he told me he was the one, I was so mad with him. Then I told him that he's a coward. If not, he would have come to me himself and not by note. Then he said he did not know what I was going to say because he did not want to be too forward. Then we both smiled and laughed together. Then we moved on with the party. We hung out and made a walk through a beach and had fun, and then we all decided to go to a friend's apartment. So a small group of us went into the apartment, and here comes the idea to play a blind taste game, similarly with a game we once played at school. I was so anxious to play the game, but at the same time, I didn't want to join. I simply refused, but then I thought of it that I am the one who is really good in tasting things and smell very good, so I later decided to participate in the end. So as usual, the game started and was getting more interesting and fun, but still yet throughout this period, Sean did not leave my side for once. Well, he might be thinking he might not have this type of opportunity again. So everyone's turn during the game came and went, and here it comes my turn. So a guy closed my eyes and pushed my head towards the object. So I tried to perceive the object. I was not getting it. Then I tried touching it with my nose. At first it was a strong object as I touched it with my nose a bit and said, "It's a pen," as it does not smell at all. They all smiled. And then I was wondering what could it be. I then gave another try, but the object this time was softer. I was then surprised, thinking within me, maybe the object has been changed. But then I asked if they changed the object, and changing the object is outside of game rules. They all said no, that it's still the same object, and I thought, what could it be? But I had no answer. After a little moment of thinking, I grabbed the object with my hand to know what the shape of the object looks like. Then I feel it was a tall object, similar to cylinder, and I immediately opened my eyes. I was so much afraid because it is something inappropriate. When I opened my eyes, what I saw was simply a banana, which was so different to what I felt when my eyes were closed and everyone was laughing at me. I was annoyed, and only Sean could notice it then. He came to walk me home. He explained to me that it was a banana, but still yet, I disagree. I just told him to close the discussion. When I got back home, I greeted my mom with a weird look on my face. Then I went straight to my room. She gave me some minutes to be by myself before she came to meet me. Then she asked me what happened at the party. Then I narrated everything to her, not leaving behind the aspect where Sean came to give me a long hug and a peck. She told me not to be annoyed about the game, though I have forgotten about how I felt during the game period because the thought of Sean is now all over me. So Mom asked me to gist her about Sean. So I did, and we all laughed and I was happy all through the night. When I got back to school, I discovered that I did not see the sticky note as usual. Then I looked straight down to Sean's seat, and then I saw him smiling. Then I laughed as feel. So the class started, and immediately the teacher came in. Then every other student told the teacher about everything that happened to me at the party, and they laughed. But then the teacher said to me, he will call me one day and tell me a secret behind this game. Then he left the class, but within me I am still not sure if the object was banana at first, or they changed the object during the game, as it softened and changed, and I am still confused, and I will never play that game again. This is the reason why I didn't want to participate in the game earlier. See what it all turns out to be? Please let me know in the comments if you think they've changed the object, or am I just thinking wrong?
How I celebrated 2020 and what I'm willing to do in 2021. Hi guys, I am Tess. I am the last of a family of 5 children. The girls were 3, and the boys were 2. I was the third girl and the last child, and I must confess it had its advantages. I had the protection and favor of my elder siblings while growing up. If I was denied anything by either of them, I just had to go the next, and even I was still denied, I knew that I would get it before going to the 5 of them. On one rare occasion, it seemed as though they all ganged up on me as I was surprised when they all turned me down. Well, I always had a backup plan, Mummy or Daddy. It was really incredible being the major object to favor. During my childhood days, I was not given much chores as the others. I had the luxury of sitting in front of the television with a bowl of popcorn, while others cleaned the house, and if I was asked to assist during my time out, I simply cried my eyes out until either Mummy or Daddy intervened by asking that I be left alone. I was not being spoilt. I was simply enjoying what every child who has siblings older than her should enjoy. It was as I advanced to my teenage years that I discovered that everything with an advantage equally has a disadvantage. I was sent on errands around the house at odd times by everyone. I was called to bring this, take this, pick this, get this, wash this, and every other annoying message which seemed to be available each time I wanted to have some fun. My strategy of crying and making noises just to alert Mummy and Daddy that it was time to come to my rescue seemed to now work very well against me, as they only ended up getting mad at me for my disobeying my elders who did things for me when I couldn't do them myself. They made me understand that I was now grown up and needed to assume a level of responsibility around the house just as everyone else did. It was during those times I greatly wished that I was still the baby Tess that everyone wanted to pamper. The one-time center of attention for a favor now turned to the object used in getting little things done. Nevertheless, I would never trade my siblings for another. It was nice to have people that are ahead of me because it gave me an opportunity to learn from their mistakes and experiences. They always seemed to have opinions on every experience I was going through, and most times they would tell me how certain things were likely going to play out. My both parents were huge, and so we all looked bigger than our ages. At 20 years of age, my eldest sister, Nellie, could easily be mistaken for Daddy's wife. She even behaved like a mummy, assistant mummy. She always looked out for the welfare of the rest of us. She wanted everything done in order, just as Mummy would. She was neat, and would always frown at anyone who dropped a waste anywhere, or anyone who moved past something that was out of place. She was articulate and precise. In the absence of Mom, she assumed the responsibility of dishing out chores and making sure that each one of us does thorough work. She always tried as much as possible to avoid mistakes, and she got so hard on herself when she did. Nellie was good at studying people, and often used her head rather than her heart. She was not always moved by emotions and sentiments. She was the toughest of us all, and she always demanded respect from the rest of us. This was where she often had issues with Richard. Richard was the second child and first boy. He was 2 years younger than Nellie, but you would think he was married. At 22, Richard looked so mature that if you visited our house when Dad was away, you would think that he was the man of the house, even though he never acted so. He loved his space and hated being bossed around, something Nellie often did. This was no wonder they always had issues that we had all gotten used to. Richard was a fine young man who was heavily built. He had no issues getting the attention of ladies. On several occasions, Richard had been approached by women who were far older than him. There was one time he was even approached by a married lady who was twice his age, and all she just wanted was sex. He, however, how best not to set a bad example for the younger ones who were behind him, so he often had his escapades with ladies outside the home. Patty was next in line. She was 2 years younger than Richard. She easily got along with people and had a great distaste for arguments. If you ever got into an argument with Patty over something that was rightfully hers, she was likely going to let it go. She always loved a serene and peaceful atmosphere. Patty was emotional and naive, and one could easily take advantage of her. It was no new thing to see Patty crying over a guy. She never did seem to learn her lesson though, as the next guy who shows her a little bit of affection was sure to win her heart. 2 years after Patty was born, my parents welcomed Tim into the family. Tim was a good friend to keep, but a very bad for to have. He could love as easily as he could hate. Tim always saw the good in everybody, until he was shown their bad side. He was the kind of person who wouldn't judge another based on rumors. Tim had no issues trusting you, but when you betrayed his trust, one thing was certain: you had found a foe for life. It took about 3 years before I was introduced into the family tree, and that was because my parents never really planned for me. I came anyhow. Though I wasn't planned for, I was welcomed. My parents, however, took measures to ensure I had no one behind me. We were a typical family, just like everyone else. We had the regular fights and misunderstandings which children in other homes had. However, one thing which was clear to outsiders was that they were not permitted to mess with either of us. An assault on one of us was an assault on all of us, and you could be sure that we would always react as a group. One time when Patty was 7 years old, she was constantly picked on by a bully in her class. He constantly took a part of her lunch. Patty was not suited for a fight, so she constantly let him have his way. This bully threatened to severely deal with her if she reported to anyone. She suffered quietly, not because she was afraid of what would become of her when she told her elder siblings, but she knew what awaited the bully once Nellie and Richard, who were 9 and 11 years then, get to know. Her fears soon came to pass when the news of her maltreatment got to Nellie through a friend of Patty's. Nellie wasn't going to wait around to confirm it the rumor was true. She immediately marched down to the playground and saw crying as the bully was about to leave with part of her lunch. Like a hungry lioness who just found a defenseless lamb, Nellie pounced on him with all of her aggression and might. The bully couldn't tell what had hit him, but it hit him really hard. Patty and the few kids around stood watching. Nellie couldn't be stopped, and most of the kids didn't even want her to, because they have been victims of this notorious bully. Some kids ran to call any teacher in sight, while others ran to call Richard to come and stop Nellie. Richard was in class when he was told that Nellie was fighting at the playground. Richard quickly rushed to the playground, and rather than stop Nellie, who was beating up the bully, he immediately joined her to inflict more pain. The teachers finally arrived and separated the fight. That day, our parents were called alongside the parents of the bully who had just lost 3 teeth. Upon inquiry, the school authorities discovered that Patty was not the only victim of this bully who had constantly picked on kids. He was suspended from school for 4 weeks while Nellie and Richard were sent on detention for taking laws into their hands. When the bully returned, he avoided Patty like plague. Even though we watched out for each other, and we often spent time together, there were still moments where the girls had secrets that they were not willing to share with the boys, and of course, there were things too that the boys didn't share with everyone else, so you could find the boys alone, separated from the girls. I, however, had the privilege of listening to both parties when I was allowed. I was the baby of the house after all. We all knew that Patty was vulnerable because of her personality, and could easily be taken for granted, so Nellie decided to help her whenever she passed through any crisis. She acted as a guide, especially when it came to relationship issues with boys. What Nellie did for Patty, Richard did for Tim. Although Tim was more outspoken than Patty, it seemed as though he could sometimes be as naive, especially when it had to do with ladies, and so Richard, who was ahead of him in every way, equally acted as a guide. It didn't matter what advice and guidance these two had, they always seemed to fall prey. There was a guy who moved into the area where we stayed. He was 23 years old. He was cute, and the kind of guy every girl would die to have, and Patty was one of the girls. Ladies began flocking around him. Patty felt like the luckiest girl in the world when he started making advances at her. What others were running after, came running after her. She felt special, and that feeling was what got her into a mess. He was all Patty could, and would choose to think about. She went out of her way to please him as much as she could. Nellie knew this guy was no good. She had been there before, and she saw the red flag. She tried telling Patty to take things slow because not much was known about this guy. I watched as Patty defended him. She said his name was Matt, and he wasn't just any guy. Nellie knew that at this point, nothing she said to Patty would be welcomed by her, so she left her. It wasn't long before the things Nellie said started coming to light. Matt always had one sorry story, or the other to tell, so that he could feed off Patty's allowance. Whenever he took her out on a date, he always seemed to have misplaced his wallet, which he claimed contained his credit card. Patty would end up paying. This was just his move, so he could have a free lunch or dinner because he was totally broke and did not know where his next meal was going to come from. He always claimed to have rich parents who were out of town, and he never failed to make empty promises to Patty which he never fulfilled. He promised to buy her the world when she would be celebrating her 18th birthday. However, 3 days before her birthday, he stopped talking to her. She tried getting in touch with him, but it was not possible. On her 18th birthday celebration, he was nowhere to be seen. Patty was furious, disappointed, and heartbroken. How could he disappoint her on the very day that she needed to show him to everyone? She just hoped that he had a good explanation. She couldn't imagine her elder sister Nellie being right all along. It was the day after her birthday celebration that he sent a message to her through one of his friends. He claimed to have been in the hospital for 3 days, and only just got back home. Patty felt bad, guilty, and sad. She became angry at herself for thinking that Matt may have played her when he was in the hospital all along. She quickly over his place. She was determined to stand by his side. Before leaving his place, she gave him part of the money she had received the previous day during her birthday celebration. It was when she had almost boarded a cab that she discovered she had left her mobile phone behind at Matt's place. It was when she was about knocking on the door that she overheard his discussions with his friends. He was not ill. He never was. It was his plan all along. He had no money to buy her the things that he had promised her for a birthday, and so he had to devise a means to stay away. He equally did not want to take the risk of being seen by some of Patty's friends who were equally his victims. He equally knew that Patty would get some monetary gifts at her birthday, and he wanted to have a share, and now he had. He had killed 3 birds with 1 stone. Patty listened with teary eyes as Matt and his friends made jest of her. They called her stupid, naive, crazy, and delusional for falling for Matt. They said that they were amazed to see someone this big with no brains to match her size, and it was only a matter of time before Matt would sleep with her. Patty was hit hard, and her wound was too deep. She had heard enough. She would probably die right there if she heard any more. She quickly turned around and picked up a cab. The cab driver really felt sorry for Patty as he drove her back home. She was weeping as though she wanted to die from it. The driver, who was seriously concerned about what might have happened to her, failed at getting an answer from her. Immediately he got to our house, she ran out of the car and made her way into the house without paying him. We were all in the sitting room, Dad, Mom, and the rest of us, when she ran past everyone without even waiting around to greet them. It was clear that something was wrong. But before we could get to her, she locked the door and began crying profusely. It was just then that the cab driver came knocking on the door and politely told us Patty was yet to pay him. He did get his money, but it was after he was made to answer a series of questions about what happened to Patty. He told us all he knew, and from all indications, he was telling the truth. Nellie knew that whatever it was that put Patty this way had to do with Matt. We tried getting Patty to open up. It had been a whole day since the incident. She had missed dinner, and breakfast was about missing lunch. We all took turns to appeal to her to come out. She seemed not to listen to anybody, not even Mom, and Dad could get her to open up. It was Nellie who eventually had her open up after she told her that she knew Matt was behind this whole thing. When Patty came out, she looked really pale, and so before asking her any questions, we all pleaded with her to eat some food. After eating, Nellie helped clean her up before Mom and Dad put her to bed. She needed rest. A lot of it. Richard and Tim eagerly waited just to know who or what had caused their sister such pain. They just needed a name and address. It was an hour before dinner time that Patty woke up and was finally ready to tell us what happened. Patty had barely gone halfway with her story when Richard and Tim made for the door, and we all knew their destination and next action. It took a lot for Daddy to restrain them both. Our dad was a cop, and so, he always wanted things done by the book. He had always been against us taking laws into our hands. After listening to Patty, Daddy noted that this was a fraudulent case of manipulation, one that the law seriously frowned at. Our dad did, however, note that, although Patty had just been victimized, there was no evidence to support her claim, and it was just her word against Matt. If we were going to get justice for Patty, then we needed to beat Matt at his own game. We needed some evidence. Patty was then made to call Matt that evening to tell him that she had left her phone at his place. Patty played her part so well that Matt didn't suspect a thing in the world. She asked about his health, about his friends, then asked to take him out for lunch the next day, so that he could bring her mobile phone along. It was the kind of opportunity Matt always desired, and so he readily accepted. The plan was to avoid going to his house now he was seen for what he was, a snake. Dad had to warn Patty against being in a private area with him because he could rape her. While she played her part, Dad would do some investigations just to know more about Matt. We all knew that Patty was going through a lot, and so we were very determined to give her all the love and support that she would need. She officially became the baby of the house on a temporal basis. Nellie knew that Patty had to set her emotions aside if she was going to successfully make Matt pay. She knew that Patty, who was very emotional, would find it very difficult playing Matt's own game of deception when she was still into him, so to help Patty, she called her that into her room that evening for a chit-chat. I was already with Nellie when she entered the room. She immediately began apologizing to Nellie for not taking her advice when she gave it. Nellie couldn't hide a grin as she told Patty that she was never angry at her. I listened as she told Patty that she only knew it would turn out this way because she had been there before. Just like Patty, she had been hurt severally in the past, that she had now become familiar with the red flags and could tell someone who was a scam from a mile away. Nellie said that the knowledge she had gained from her bitter experiences made her decide to always put her head before her heart. She had toughened up over time. She now began advising Patty and me against tolerating what we don't like from a guy. She said that when you get a little bit tolerant, they end up trying to take you for a ride, and so, if at any point in any relationship, we become uncomfortable, we should immediately call it quits. There should always be a line which we shouldn't let the guys cross. She then further gave an instance of her experience with a guy 3 years ago. She said that when the guy wanted to date her, she never liked him because he was dirty. He had a terrible body odor that his cologne couldn't hide. When he opened his mouth to profess his undying love, she could only smell death. His breath stank. She saw that they were not compatible in any way. She took cleanliness very seriously, and he just seemed too comfortable in filth. It was a red flag, which meant that she shouldn't go further, but because almost all of her friends were having boyfriends, she didn't want to feel left out, and so, she just tolerated him. It was when she was invited for a romantic dinner at his place that she knew the relationship was doomed. There was nothing romantic about the atmosphere. He was dirty to the bones and never seemed to care. This was more than she bargained for, and she wasn't having any more of it. It was when she told him that she couldn't continue anymore that he decided to rape her, and although he did not succeed because she raised an alarm, the incident traumatized her for a while. Nellie was a great sister, and she deserved every respect we gave her. Her words of encouragement were all Patty needed to hear. I usually enjoyed the times when we bonded like this. I never told anyone that I already had a guy who wanted me to be his girlfriend. Thanks to Nellie, I then knew that it wouldn't work because of the red flags I saw. Her advice then made me realize what my vision for the coming year 2021 was, growing in self-love and personal development, and I was determined to start actualizing the vision from the year 2020 that was soon going to be over. During lunch with Matt the next day, Patty was really composed. The words of Nellie last night had a great impact on her. She had rehearsed everything she was going to say, and how she was going to behave during lunch. As usual, she paid for the food with the money Dad had given her. Since the whole family was now involved, Dad and Mom made sure that she had the money needed to satisfy Matt's greed. Matt pounced on the dish without mercy. It was when he had eaten to his satisfaction that he then began reassuring Patty of his undying love. He claimed that he had been telling his imaginary rich parents about her, and they were eager to meet her when they got into town. Patty acted as she fell for his story, and even though Matt tried taking her back to his place, she claimed that she had to pick up groceries for Mom and that she had already overstayed. Before leaving, she gave him some money before he started making up stories. Later on during dinner, Daddy told us that he had been checking up the public records available, but nothing came out of it. There was no record of any Matt Delaney in the system. Something was not right. Why was there no information on him? It was at that point that my dad knew the case was more serious than we had taken it to be. He involved the state by officially opening a false identity and fraud case against the alleged Matt Delaney, and investigations officially began. Even though we were terrified at the suggestion that Patty took the risk of placing her life in the hands of a person she didn't know, we were relieved to learn that we now had the resources of the government about disposal. We, however, knew that we needed to play safe. We needed to be careful about the way we were using Patty as a tool in the investigation. It took 3 weeks before the breakthrough came. There had been 3 unsolved murder cases in various parts of the states. The victims who were usually raped before being killed were between 18 and 24 years of age. The pattern was always the same, but no matter how hard the authorities tried, it always led to a dead end. Finally, a shred of evidence had surfaced, and it led the investigators right into our city. After forensic scientists carried out several tests, the result matched the DNA which was obtained from the private part of one of the victims. It was while going through the file that my dad discovered a familiar face. It was Matt. However, although the face was the same, the name was not. The name was Todd Humphrey. There were equally 2 other faces alongside Todd. Patty was called in to see if she could identify any of the faces. When she got to the station, just as my dad had said, she identified Todd Humphrey as Matt, and she even went further to identify the remaining 2 faces as his friends who occasionally visited Todd. The cops immediately made a warrant for their arrest, but they were going to be strategic about it. The plan was to arrest the 3 friends at the same time, but it was difficult getting them to be in the same place. 2 of the friends of Todd were arrested while on their way back from getting supplies, and several illegal items such as guns, ammunition, cocaine, and various fake passports containing their names. Upon interrogation, they both agreed to be involved in the killing of the 3 murder victims. They claimed that they would study the victims for weeks before either of them would try to establish a romantic relationship with the victim. They equally gave accounts of how they would dupe the victims of large sums of money, and would eventually introduce the victim to drugs, but if the victim refused to be initiated into the use of drugs, they then knew that they stood a chance of getting reported to the authorities, and so, had no other option than to end the life of the victim. This, they did by taking turns to rape her before killing her. They noted that all three of their victims had refused to take drugs. The police raided Todd's house, but he wasn't there, just as his friends had said. They said that they have certain times which they communicated, and if there was no communication from anybody, then it was an indicator that something had gone wrong. It was when they were about communicating with Todd that the cops showed up, and Todd would probably have gone into hiding. The cops further questioned them to know if they had any idea where Todd might be hiding, but they said that they had decided against letting each other know their whereabouts, just in case the police caught up with any of them. It was at this point that the police knew that Patty was their biggest chance of catching Todd, but they knew that if they alerted the neighborhood, he would be certain that he was wanted, and would further try to evade them, so they waited to see if he would contact her, and he did. Todd called Patty and claimed to be in danger. He said that some persons were after his life. They wanted to kidnap and make some money off of him because of who his parents were. He asked Patty for some money to get out of the city but promised to send it back to her when he got together with his parents. Patty said that she could have the money ready by 2 p.m. the following, but she didn't know how to reach him. He said that he couldn't disclose it to her for her own safety. However, he told her to get ready by 2 p.m., as he was going to call her to give her directions on where to meet. As soon as he hung up the call, the cops who had been listening began setting plans in motion. The money was made available to Patty, who equally had a tracker placed on her. The cops would have stationed themselves around the area where she would be meeting up with him if he had disclosed the location. But he was smart enough not to. He called Patty 2 hours before the agreed time. This action almost jeopardized the plan of the cops, who were not yet ready, as they thought that they still had 2 more hours. Patty was left with no other option than to go without the cops, as any delay would get Todd suspicious. Although all hope was not lost as she had the tracker on, the cops were far behind. Patty soon found herself in a popular clubhouse filled with all manner of people. It was a place she had never been to. It was while she stood inside looking lost that she received a text asking her to come to a particular room upstairs. It was in there that she met Todd. He observed that she was not as excited as before, and when he asked her what the matter was, she said she was only really sad that he would be leaving. He seemed to fall for the lie, even though she was afraid, as every other person who was alone with a murderer would. After she gave him the money, he wanted something more. He wanted what he had long desired. But this was something that she didn't bargain for, so she told him that she needed to go home before they realized that she had been gone for too long. He wasn't buying this now. This was the last time that he was ever going to set his eyes on her, and he would have his way, one way or another. He reached for her and forcefully started taking off her clothes. When she resisted, he hit her really hard, and that was when the tracker fell off. Todd was furious. He knew that Patty was a means of getting to him. He immediately pulled a gun. But before he could pull the trigger, the cops broke into the room, and a gunfight ensued. He was shot multiple times to the head, and he was pronounced dead on the spot. But not after a shot fired by him hit Patty on her chest. We all waited in the hospital for the doctor's verdict. When he came out of the theater, he said that Patty would live. The bullet had missed her heart. She was stabilized. We felt great relief. The fear of losing Patty had cast a shadow of gloom over all of us, but now, we were grateful for the light of hope shining. Patty returned home 3 months later. To celebrate her return, I sensitized the girls in my school on the need for self-love and emotional maturity. By 2021, I would set up a GoFundMe account for Patty that will enable us to generate the funds to reach out to more girls. Hey guys, what would you do if you were me? What would you do if you were me? What would you do if you were me? Why Sophia must take a very difficult decision. My name is Sophia. I am 16 years of age. I was born in Miami and I lived there with my parents. I attended St. Margaret School. After graduating from St. Margaret, I moved to St. Paul High School. When I joined St. Paul High School, a lot of boys approached me. They wanted to date me, but I was not interested in any of them. I became the topic of discussion among the boys in the school. Everybody was giving me different names. Some said I am boastful, while others said I have pride. Others that I did not know said a lot of unpleasant things about me. I was different among all the girls in the school because most girls in the school had a boyfriend in the school. I saw it as something that wasn't acceptable, so I did not engage in it. Days went by and I continued to keep my stand. I knew the best thing was for me to stay outside any relationship in the school, even though I needed someone I could confide in then. A few days before the examination, I heard that everybody in my class planned not to sit close to me in the exam. They said they wanted to use that to send a message to me that if I do not their wish, I would suffer in school. I was laughing as Mary was telling me. She said she told me because she loved my personality and she thinks what I am doing is the best. What I heard from my junior Mary prompted me to read harder than I was doing before. I started reading at night because I wanted to be well prepared for the exam. I had another motivation to do well in my exam. My dad promised to take me to a cinema to watch a movie if I perform very well in my exam. I haven't watched a movie in a cinema before, so I thought this was the perfect opportunity to do so. When I got to school on Monday, the head teacher came to the assembly ground and told us that our exam will commence the next Monday. He urged all of us to read very well for the exam. He said at the end of the exam, the best student will be rewarded with the new iPhone 12. When I heard the announcement from the head teacher, I became more motivated than ever. I was using an Android phone then and it was not even a big phone. There were a lot of things that I was not able to do on my phone. My dad decided not to buy another one for me until I graduate from high school. After the announcement, the head teacher told us to go to our classes. As I was walking to my class, I could not take the thought of owning an iPhone 12 off my head. It sounded like the biggest motivation. 2 hours to the end of the school activities, Mr. John came to our class to inform us that he has prepared our timetable. He took his whiteboard marker and started writing. I took one of my notes and I wrote the exam timetable. I was happy with the timetable because 2 of my favorite subjects were slated for the first day. I loved mathematics and English language a lot. Therefore, when I saw that they were my first paper, I became happy and more willing for the exam to start. At exactly 2 p.m., the timekeeper rang the bell for the close of the day. I picked my bag and I rushed home because I was very hungry. When I got home, my mom had already prepared lunch. She told me to take off my school uniform and take a shower before eating. I wanted to eat first before doing any other thing, but I know my mom would not allow me to eat if I do not do what she says. I dropped my bag in my room and I took off my uniform. I entered my bathroom and I took a shower. I changed into another dress before coming out of my room. I rushed to the dining where my food was. I ate the food hurriedly because I was very hungry. When I finished eating, I sat on the couch to relax my brain because I was very tired. My mom sat close to me and she was asking me what happened in school. I told my mom what the head teacher said on the assembly. I asked her if she would allow me to use the iPhone if I win the award for being the overall best student in the school. My mom said I have come of age, so she cannot stop me from using an iPhone if I am awarded as the overall best student in my school. I was very happy, but I needed to confirm with my dad too. I sat patiently on the couch waiting for my dad to return from his office. When my dad returned from his office, I waited for him to take a shower and his lunch. I know it was his tradition to always watch CNN news before going to bed, so I waited on the couch. A few minutes later, my dad came to the sitting room and sat close to me. As soon as he sat, I told him what our head teacher said in school. My dad said it's a welcome development. He said he likes what the school is doing to motivate its students. I told him that the question I have for him is that I want to know if he would allow me to use the iPhone 12 if I am awarded as the best student. My dad said he has no other option than to allow me to use it because if I win, it will be a product of my hard work. I smiled, I appreciated him, and I went straight to my room. As soon as I entered my room, I opened my bag and I brought out my mathematics and English notebook. I read from the first topic to the last topic that night. I did not sleep until 3:30 a.m. As early as 6:30 a.m., I was awake getting prepared for school. Even though what I was getting myself into was difficult, the packages that will follow if I eventually become the best student were worth it. When I woke up, I did my daily routine, which was to pray, brush my teeth, take my bath, put on my school uniform, and eat my breakfast. After eating my breakfast, I went straight into my dad's car. I opened the door and I sat down while I wait for my dad to join me in the car. After about 5 minutes, my dad entered the car and we drove off. My dad dropped me off at the school gate and he drove off while I made my way into the school. When I entered, students were on the assembly, so I joined them. I was surprised to see the head teacher on the assembly ground. He said the reason he was on the assembly ground was to motivate us to do well in our upcoming exam. He said students that do well will receive valuable gifts from the school. He said students that fail will repeat their classes. After the announcement, the head teacher told us to go to our classes. For more than 2 hours, no teacher came to the class because it was revision week. Most of the teachers have completed their revision, therefore they do not need to come to class. 45 minutes before the break, Miss Williams came to our class. She was the only teacher that hasn't held a revision class with us. When she entered our class, she told all of us to bring out our notebooks. We started revising from the first topic and we ended our revision with the last topic. She urged us to read very well for her exam because it would not come easy. She said the questions she gave us are standard and technical questions that require a lot of reasoning. She left our class when the bell for the break was rung. As soon as I heard the bell, I went straight to the school canteen because I was very hungry. I ate to my satisfaction before returning to class. 2 hours after returning to class, The bell for closing time was rung. I picked my bag and I headed home. When I got home, I did my usual traditions, which were to bathe, eat, rest on the couch and wait for the next day. I did all these till Friday. When I got to home on Friday, I locked myself in my room. I read as if my life depended on the exam. I didn't come out of my room until Sunday when we were going to church. When we got to church, I was just praying for the church service to end so that I can return home. 5 hours later, the church service ended and we headed back home. When we got home, we were all hungry, so I joined Mom in the kitchen while my dad sat on the couch. After 45 minutes, the food was ready. We all went to the dining to eat. As soon as I finished eating, I went back into my room while my mom and dad sat on the couch. I read throughout the night. I read my notebooks from the first page to the last page. At exactly 4 a.m., I lied down on my bed to rest my brain. Deep into my sleep, I heard a knock on my door. I knew it was either my mom or my dad. I asked who was at the door. My mom replied. She told me to get up and start preparing for school. She said if I do not get up, I won't be able to follow my dad because he will soon be on his way to work. I jumped up from my bed and rushed into the bathroom because I didn't want to miss the trip with my dad. I usually find it difficult getting to school using a public bus. At exactly 7 a.m., my mom came back to my door and knocked. This time around, I opened the door immediately. I heard the knock because I was already set. When I opened the door, my mom told me that I should rush down to my dad's car because he was already in the car waiting for me. I didn't wait for her to complete her sentence before I started running to the car. As soon as I entered the car, my dad drove off. We arrived at St. Paul High School at exactly 7:30 a.m. My dad dropped me in front of the school gate like he always does and drove off. I didn't have the opportunity to drop my bag in my class because students were already coming out to the assembly ground after they heard the bell. I dropped my bag with the security men while I moved to the assembly ground. After the morning assembly routine, the head teacher came to address us. He told us the exam was starting that morning and he expects that we should have been prepared. He warned all students to stay away from exam malpractice. He said any student that is caught engaging in exam malpractice will face the school's disciplinary committee. He said facing the school disciplinary committee might lead to outright expulsion. He also warned all students to desist from taking anything to the exam hall that can implicate them. He said all students should check their pockets before going to the exam hall. He said the school management would not tolerate any excuse from any student if he or she is caught with incriminating materials in the exam hall. He also said another thing that is banned from the exam hall is a cell phone. He said any student that is caught with a cell phone in the exam hall will face prosecution. He said it is an act that the school frowns at, so every student should try their possible best to desist from any form of examination malpractice. He showed us a photograph he brought to the assembly ground. The photograph had the picture of students that were expelled from St. Paul School due to examination malpractice. After the head teacher finished his speech, he told us to walk our classes and wait for our teachers. When I got to my class, I opened my notebook and started revising what I read at home. After about 30 minutes, Mr. John came to our class with exam questions. He said all students should move to the exam hall. He told us to leave our books and bags in the class. He said we are only allowed to enter the exam hall with our pens. I opened my bag and I took my pen. I left my bag on my seat and I made my way to the examination hall. We are asked to form a queue in front of the exam hall. Mr. Patrick stood in front of the exam hall and was calling our names one after the other. When he calls the name of any student, he will check the student's identity card and the student's examination clearance before he allows the student to enter the hall. He did that for all students before we were all allowed to settle down for the exam. As soon as he noticed that we were all seated, he started distributing the exam questions. After distributing the exam questions, he took his whiteboard marker and wrote the starting and stopping times on the whiteboard. After writing the start and stop time, he told us to start. He went around the exam hall to check if there was any student that brought any incriminating material while the head teacher was monitoring the exam through the CCTV camera in his office. The exam started at exactly 9 a.m. Therefore, at exactly 11 a.m., we were asked to submit our papers. As soon as I submitted it, I rushed back to my class to revise before we will be called for the next examination. 30 minutes after, we were told to return to the examination hall for the next subject. The same procedure that was carried out for the first exam was carried out for the second exam. We queued and presented our identity card and examination clearance before we were allowed into the examination hall. The second examination began at exactly 11:30 a.m. The examiner gave us 2 hours. When I collected the question pair, I smiled because everything I have been reading throughout the previous week came out in the exam, just as Mr. Patrick did in the first paper. He took his whiteboard marker and wrote the start and stop time as soon as he gave us the examination paper. He told us that everyone will submit at exactly 1:30 a.m. irrespective of whether the person has finished solving the questions or not. He said those that are through before the slated time are allowed to submit. I started solving the questions from the first to the fifth. The exam had 7 questions, but the instruction of the examiner was that we should answer 5 questions. By 12:45 p.m., I was through with all my questions. I took my time to go through the answers one after the other to avoid any mistakes that might arise when the examiner is marking my script. The thought of iPhone 12 and a visit to the cinema would not want me to fail. I checked all questions and my answers and I saw that they were perfect. At exactly 1:15 p.m., I stood up from my seat and submitted my examination paper. As soon as I gave Mr. Patrick my answer booklet, he told me to go outside. I went back to my classroom waiting for other students to submit their papers so that we can be told to go home. At exactly 1:15 p.m., Mr. Patrick told all students to submit. He collected the entire answer booklet. When he came out, he told us to go home and prepare for the next exam on Tuesday. I was already holding my bag in my hand, so I didn't have to go back to the class. I immediately made my way to the school gate. Fortunately, I saw a taxi when I came out of the school gate. The taxi dropped me in front of our house. I gave him his money and I entered our house. Just as I usually do when I come back from school, I went into my room and took my shower. I changed into another outfit and I went to the kitchen to have my lunch. While I was eating, my mom asked me how the examination went. I told her my reading paid off because I saw everything I read in the exam. She was very happy. She told me not to relent. She told me to put more effort so that I can become the best student in my school. After my lunch, I sat on the couch to relax my head. My books were already on my table in my room. I put my alarm at 5 p.m. and I slept off on the couch. At exactly 5 p.m., the alarm started ringing. As soon as I heard the alarm, I woke up and I went into my room. I opened it and started reading for the next exam. I read until 1 a.m. before I retired to my bed. I woke up as early as exactly 6 a.m. and I went to the bathroom to take my bath. After taking my bath, I put on my uniform and I came to the sitting room to wait for my dad. When my dad came to the sitting room, he was surprised to me in the room already dressed. We all took breakfast and we went into his car. At exactly 7 a.m., we arrived at my school. My dad dropped me off and he went on his way while I made my way to my class. At exactly 7:30 a.m., we were called to the assembly ground. The head teacher reminded us of all the rules and regulations involving the examination. He told us to continue working harder to achieve a good result. He told us to go straight to the exam hall because the examination will start immediately after the assembly. When he left the assembly ground, we rushed to our classes to drop our bags because we will not be allowed to enter the exam hall with our bags. After dropping my bag, I rushed down to the exam hall. There was no time to revise, but I was confident that I had prepared enough. We queued in front of the exam hall as usual. We are only allowed into the exam hall after Mr. John checked for examination clearance. We started the examination by 8 a.m. and ended at 10 p.m. We were given an hour to prepare for our next examination. I went to my class, picked my bag, and went to a silent place to read because many students were making noise in my class. I was there when I heard that the bell has been rung for the exam. I went to my class to drop my bag and I joined my colleagues in the exam hall. We started the exam at exactly 11 a.m. and it ended at 1 a.m. After Mr. John collected our examination booklet, he told us to go home. I rushed back home to prepare for the next day's examination. That was my routine throughout the examination period. It lasted for 14 days. On the final day of the exam, the head teacher applauded all students. He said we have all done well, but only one student can be awarded the prize of the best student. He told us to go home. He gave us the date when the prize for the best student will be awarded. He said all students must come with their parents on the prize-giving day. On the prize-giving day, I woke up very early and took my bath. I went to my parents' room to wake them up. My parents were very surprised to see me at their door at that time. I told them to get prepared so that we can start going to my school. I was confident that I would be awarded the best student because I read very well during the exam, and I was able to answer all the questions that came my way in the exam. I left my parents' room and went back to my room to put on my clothes because I had already taken my bath. After putting on my cloth, I came to the sitting room to wait for my parents. At exactly 7:30 a.m., my parents came out of their room already dressed. My mom prepared a light breakfast for us. After eating breakfast, we all entered my dad's car and he drove off. We arrived at my school at exactly 8 a.m. The parking lot was filled to the brim with different cars. The hall was filled as students and parents were seated patiently to see which student will go home with the award of the best student. The head teacher made his way to the podium and declared the ceremony open. He appreciated everyone present at the occasion. He said the occasion is to celebrate the student that performed better. He said before the announcement, there are other activities like singing, dancing, and debate competition. After 2 hours, all activities ended and it was time to award the best student. The head teacher said he will call 3 students to the podium. He said the 3 students had the best result. He said only of those 3 will go home with the prize. He said the other 2 will be compensated too. The head teacher told the gathering to help him welcome Mason Williams. She was received with huge cheers as she made her way to the podium. Next was Chris Taylor. He was also welcomed with sounding applause. I became scared when the headmaster mentioned 2 names without mentioning my name. I began to wonder if I would be called. I never lost hope because I knew I did well in my exam. After that, the head teacher said permit me to welcome Sophia White to the podium. I stood up with cheers on my face. My dad and my mom were smiling at me from where they were sitting. I walked to the podium and joined Chris Taylor and Mason Williams who were already standing. The head teacher reminded the gathering that every student on the podium did well in the exam. He said it's just unfortunate that it is only one person that can wear the crown. He said everybody is a winner including those that were not called to the podium. The head teacher announced the 3rd position which was Mason Williams. She collected her prize and she left the podium. It was time to announce the 1st position. I was shaking where I was standing. I kept remembering iPhone 12 and a trip to the cinema. The head teacher said the prize for the best student goes to Sophia. I screamed in excitement. My dad and my mom joined me on the podium to receive my prize. The head teacher brought out a new iPhone 12 and presented it to me. As soon as I collected the iPhone 12, I opened the box and started taking pictures with it. Other teachers presented gifts to me. Mr. John gave me a school bag while another teacher gave me an umbrella. I took photos with my mom and dad. I took photos with the head teacher and other teachers. After the photo session, food was served to all the guests. I ate to my satisfaction. After the meal, my dad told me it was time to go home. I went over to my teachers and gave each one of them a hug. I appreciated them for their investment in me. I told them I wouldn't be the best student if they did not take their time to teach me very well in class. I rushed down to where my dad parked his car. When I got there, my dad was getting ready to move. I entered the car and we drove off. While we were driving, my dad kept appreciating me. He said I have made him proud. He said the joy he felt when he was called to join me on the podium cannot be quantified. He said the last time he felt that happy was when my mother gave birth to me. He urged me not to relent in my studies. He urged me to continue making him proud. At exactly 4 p.m., we arrived home. We were all tired, so we all went into our rooms. I was the first person to wake up the next morning. I sat on the couch waiting for my dad to come out of his room. After about an hour, my dad came out of his room. I greeted him and he responded. He told me to join him in the dining so that we can have breakfast. While we were having breakfast, I reminded my dad of his promise. I said I want to go to the cinema as soon as possible. My dad agreed to take me to the cinema the next day. I woke up very early in the morning because I had some laundry to do. I packed my clothes into the bathroom and I washed them. After I finished my laundry, I took my bath. I checked the time and it was 7 a.m. I knew breakfast would be ready, so I went to the kitchen to eat breakfast. While I was eating, my dad came out of his room. He said we will be going to the cinema by 10 a.m. He said the movie we want to watch will be shown by 11 a.m. After I finished eating my breakfast, I went back to my room and picked up my novel. I read my novel until 8:30 a.m. before I slept off. I set my alarm at 9:30 a.m. before I slept. As soon as the alarm rang at 9:30 a.m., I got up from my bed and dressed up. I hurriedly dressed up and I came out to the sitting room. A few minutes later, my dad came out of his room already dressed and we moved to the car. We left the house at 10 a.m. and we arrived at the cinema at 11:30 a.m. When we got to the cinema, we went to get our tickets. While my father was buying the tickets, he saw his old friend. My dad and his friend hugged each other. When we entered the cinema, my dad sat at the front with his friend while I went to the back seat. A few minutes later, a young man in his mid-20s came to where I was sitting and sat close to me. He asked for my name and I told him my name is Sophia. He told me his name is Michael. He asked about my family background, educational background, and many other things. He looked cute, so I was happy to answer his questions. Some hours into the discussion, it became more intimate. He asked me if I have a boyfriend and I told him I do not. He looked amazed when I said so. He said he does not have a girlfriend too. He said he has been looking at me from where he was sitting. He said he was happy that I did not sit close to my dad because there was no way he would have approached me. He ended his conversation by saying he loves me. He said he wants me to become his girlfriend. I loved him too, but I did not want to say it immediately so that he wouldn't think I am cheap. I gave him my cell phone number. I told him to call me so that we can talk better. After I gave him my phone number, I told him to leave because I noticed that my dad was already looking for me. After the movie, we entered the car and drove off. I couldn't take his thought off me. It was as if I haven't seen a man before. When we got home, I went straight to my room because I was expecting his call. 30 minutes later, Fred called me. We talked about the movies and many other things. He told me he is still waiting for my reply about his proposal. I told him that I needed to ask him a question that I forgot to ask at the cinema. He told me to ask. I asked him about his age. He said he was 26. Fred told me to give him an instant answer to his proposal. I told Fred that I loved him too. He was very happy as I could hear how loud he was screaming on the phone. We talked about many things before I dropped the call. Since I dropped the call, I have been thinking, I love Fred so much, but I am afraid to continue the relationship because of his age. Fred is 10 years older than me. I think the age difference is much. Hey, guys, please let me know if this is right or your thoughts on this. Warm adventures. This story begins during the most beautiful season, summer. During summer, everything seems possible. It's where the world gets more beautiful. Life becomes joyful and everything seems to come back to life. The main character of this story is actually called Summer, a teenager, an only child, me. Imagine loving a season so much. You name your child after it. I don't mind though, I love my name. I was born during the season of summer. Maybe that's why I'm always excited about it. I come from a very small family. It's just me, mom, and dad. Not every day is a good day. It gets lonely. I always wished for a sister, but I know things are not okay between my parents. They don't even sleep on the same bed anymore. They fight. They leave me behind. Maybe that's why I am so rebellious. My mom and dad hate my choices. They hate the fact that I smoke, but they smoke too. So, what's the problem here? I actually enjoy smoking. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel free. I love the smell of cigarettes. My mom, Violet, is a nurse. She says that she didn't used to smoke, but I guess I give her so much stress. So she smokes, but that's just a reason she likes to use it. That's what she says. My dad, John, is a lawyer. Not much to say about him. He's never home. I try to understand though. To understand that they work. But sometimes is hard. I like to think that I am the way I am because of my parents. Looking at them got me realizing that I will never have kids unless I'm ready and that I completely love the man that I'm with. Because, in the end, the one that suffers is the child. It's me that suffers. Summer, a 17-year-old that has no fault in life. My grades suck, obviously, because I hate school. I have no motivation. I also go to a psychologist. During those 2 years, I realized that everyone needs help. Everyone needs a psychologist. It's not a shame to ask for help. We're taught to think that only sick people need therapy. A psychologist. That's not true. I recommend that every couple should go to therapy, so the child doesn't have to. I enjoy it though. My psychologist is a 45-year-old woman called Amy. Amy is such a sweetheart. I love going there just because of her. She inspires me for good. I can't imagine a day without her. Amy is the reason why I am writing this. She says that it might help to express my feelings better. So yeah, I'm actually getting into writing stories, writing about my life, my problems, what brings me joy and so much more. Amy says that I should write 5 things that I am grateful for every day. So, today I am thinking about what I'm grateful for. First of all, I am so grateful for my health. I can walk on my own legs. They can take me anywhere. Out of this world. Secondly, I am grateful for my beloved friend who got my back always. His name is Nick. Nick is that type of guy who anyone would fall for. He's funny and respectful. He just gets me every time. Everyone at our school thinks that we're dating. But, can a girl and a boy be friends for once? Even though, sometimes I notice that he gets jealous when a guy comes and tries to talk to me. He hates that. He doesn't say, but I see. I hope he doesn't love me. Love is a big word. I hope he doesn't see me that way. I don't have any girlfriends. I think girls can be very jealous and toxic in friendships. Girls are too dramatic. I don't need drama. I have enough at home. That's all I can think of what I am most grateful for today. However, Amy also asked me to write about things that I am passionate about. What makes me happy? What makes me happy? I love new things. I love trying new things. I love changing my hair color. My hair is long and pink at the moment. I love piercings. I have a belly button piercing. It didn't hurt as bad as it sounds. My parents weren't so happy about it at first, but they got used to it, I think. Mom actually got me a gold belly button piercing. I prefer gold rather than silver. What made my parents go crazy that brings me joy? Tattoos. I love tattoos. I have 2 months ago. I found this cute little tattoo shop that obviously doesn't care how old you're gonna get tattooed anyways. No one cares when they see your money. So that's what I did. I have a moon tattoo and a star tattoo. I don't lie, but when I look at the sky during the daytime, the freshness of the night puts me in a good mood, a feeling of calmness. I love music, loud music, heartfelt music. Sometimes I feel bad for not listening to my parents. They are all I have. Something bad that I did brought me here where I am. One sleepless night, I decided to take my mom's car. Since it was summer and school was over, not to go to meet with a boy, not going to do drugs. I simply needed an open road and some good music. I thought no one would notice. It was 3 a.m. I was doing my thing, listening to the weekend songs. Then I stopped by at a gas station and got some fast, super not healthy food. And got home. My mom was waiting there, in her pajamas, looking all mad. She never yelled at me like that before. I was surprised. She really seemed angry. She said, "You'll see tomorrow." I slept, thinking that tomorrow is gonna be the day the same as the other days, thinking that I was gonna sleep till the afternoon or something. But I got woken up very early. It was 8 a.m. I woke up to the noise of my mom packing my clothes. It felt like a dream. Then, she told me her plan. I was gonna spend my summer at my grandma's house. My mother's mom. Her name is Emily. She lives in Hawaii. So we don't really know much about her. She rarely visits. I only remember her when I was a little girl. But I simply don't want to go there. I have my own little life here. My Amy, who I talk to every day. My Nick. My music. Is there even Wi-Fi in Hawaii? What do you do there? Thoughts were rushing like waves in my mind. But I had no time to think anymore. My plane apparently leaves in 30 minutes. I didn't even get the chance to talk to Amy. To Nick. Nick is gonna bored without me. All summer without me. It felt like my mother just wanted to get rid of me. My eyes actually got tears. If that's what she wanted, then all right. I got on the plane. A long road was waiting ahead of me. How can you let your own child go to Hawaii on her own and get angry when she goes for a car ride? Unacceptable. I slept all the way to Hawaii. I woke up and took a look at the window. Oceans all the way. I got off the plane. Then I saw my grandma. There she was. Even all those years, I recognized her face. She started crying and hugging me. I felt the love. She felt like how a family is supposed to feel. The ride from the airport was long, but I couldn't help but stare at the beautiful views that Hawaii had. We finally got home. I tried to get on my phone, but the Wi-Fi wouldn't work unless you go to a local shop. Great. I was bored, so I fell asleep. Very much needed. The next day comes and apparently, Grandma works. She sells fresh fruits from her garden such as watermelons, pineapple, so we didn't get to talk too much. I didn't do much either. Days went by. We weren't sharing much. I seemed to notice that she works hard, and she lives alone, which is weird. One day I decided to ask why she was alone. She said, "I don't need anyone who doesn't need me. I don't need a man so I can feel loved." I loved that. So, every day I woke up early and helped her. We had so much fun together. She was a free soul, like me. I even worked at her shop. This way I actually made friends. I'd spend days laying by the beach and getting that perfect tan that we all girls desire. People here in Hawaii are so full of life. Surfers, dancers, and so much more. There was one girl in particular which I clicked immediately named Mona. She was a Jamaican. Beautiful long dreads. Every day she would show me new places, new adventures. Sometimes I'd actually forget about home. I didn't need the Wi-Fi anymore. Or the music. The waves became the music to my ears. But, of course, I needed to know how Nick was doing. So we texted. I actually missed him. His corny jokes. My parents showed interest in me too. Surprisingly, texting and calling me. However, I needed this break. I have to thank Mom. Hawaii life fit me. Each day was different with new adventures. Especially one day. One very strange day. It was so much rain. Even Grandma had to close the shop. It was a warning for a hurricane. We spent the day in, hearing the sounds of the rain and eating some banana bread, hoping that everyone would be just fine. The next day, a bunch of people made an organization to go to our beach's shores and clean the mess the rain did the other night. We were divided into groups. I and Mona decided to go together. After a hurricane, there is always sun. So it was. It was a very hot day. We spent hours and hours picking up trash, until one moment, we heard a little girl's voice saying, "Help." We ran immediately to go and help. There she was, looking so fragile. So little, so beautiful. Her hair was so long and shiny. She was in the water. We ran to go and take her out, but she insisted on not to. She was naked. I was so confused. She said, "I have legs." I immediately asked for help, thinking that she is not feeling okay, like she is hallucinating. She said, "I'm fish." We were lost for words. She was a mermaid in front of our eyes. She was friendly, giggling, touching my pink hair. I gave her my dress and stayed in a bikini. We decided to take her to our grandma's house since there were people walking around who might hurt her. Grandma wasn't home yet. We fed her with some fresh fish that Grandma caught the other day. She seemed to love it. That's where she began to feel much comfortable and talk, even though her voice was shaking while talking. Am I safe here? She goes. Yes, we said. She explained that the hurricane caused trouble in the depth of the ocean. She has lost her way home. We felt sorry and offered to help, of course. She was our age, just a teenager. Her name was Medusa. Medusa's legs were shaky and weak. So we decided that every day we would take walks and strengthen her legs until we find a way to her home. Days went by. Grandma didn't even realize. She looked like a normal girl. She told beautiful, weird stories. Every day was like a dream with her. But every day she was losing her sparkle. We could tell that she was not happy. We would often catch her by the window looking at the sea. I and Mona felt useless. We decided to ask for my grandma's help. When we told her the story, she wasn't surprised. She believes that Hawaii is a magical place, and that she has seen so much more but will never tell. We searched and searched day and night for a solution. Medusa would always say that she rarely went on the surface of the water. But when she did, there were dolphins jumping around between two big mountains. When there are dolphins, there are mermaids. So we decided to go after dolphins and rainbows. Grandma says that she would take care of finding us a boat so we can take Medusa home. She found a boat and a captain. The captain didn't know anything, of course, but he seemed very suspicious. Every time the water would fall on Medusa's skin, her skin would turn into fish skin. I think he noticed something fishy. The boat ride was long. I actually got seasick. Medusa was making sounds that made the captain turn his head. Why are you doing that? Where are we going? He started asking questions that he was not supposed to. But Medusa was making sounds so she can find her family, talking in her language. We couldn't understand a thing. But she sounded so happy and hopeful. The captain had it enough. He was like, if you don't tell me right now what is happening, I am calling the police. That moment someone talked back to Medusa. It was her family, her own kind. The dolphins were going crazy. The captain understood now. He tried to take Medusa by her hand, but she swam so fast in the ocean and was never seen again. Just like that, without saying goodbye or anything. But I understand. The captain was almost catching her. The captain was so angry that he lost something so rare. He said that he would tell on us, the police, when we get back. But who would believe him anyway? After some days, a lot of people and boats were there searching for mermaids. I was so scared that someone would find something, but I guess they never did. It never made the news anyway. On this trip, I learned that people will always find a way to find something too rare and try to destroy it. Mermaids were meant to be free, just like us people. I don't know if I would tell this story to anyone. Not that anyone would believe me. I went back home. But I know for sure that I will always be back to my lovely grandma in Hawaii for some more beautiful, exciting adventures. I hope my parents would think of me as a mermaid, free and always willing to find my way back home. How I waited for Christmas Day. Hi there, I am Mabel. I grew up in a small neighborhood where we were predominantly farmers. It was a very peaceful atmosphere where we hardly witnessed crimes because it would be very easy to fish out the perpetrator. Because we were few, everyone knew all about everyone. Nothing was a secret there. News traveled fast. A very interesting thing about us was the fact that we took every celebration very seriously, especially Christmas Day celebrations, and those others that came only once a year. Christmas Day seemed to always have a magical thing to it, as you would always find people put their differences put aside just to raise a cup. It was a day when everyone had enough to eat. As children, we always looked forward to that time because we got the opportunity to visit, or receive visitors, and relatives who always brought gifts. I really enjoyed this part because that was when I had the opportunity to get new clothes and other things which I couldn't get during the year. One person that I eagerly anticipated her coming was my Auntie Stacy. My Auntie Stacy was my mother's younger sister. She was a tall blue-eyed blonde who had lots of sea. She was close to my mum, and Mum would often tell stories of how they looked out for each other while growing up. My mom and Auntie Stacy were the only children of their parents. Their parents were very religious people who cared more about their reputation than their two daughters. So when Auntie Stacy got pregnant while preparing for college, their parents, who could not stand the shame, threw her out of the house. They cut her off from the family and even demanded that my mum keep her distance from Auntie Stacy, otherwise she would suffer the same fate. They never showed an iota of pity. Not even when the parents of the young boy who got Auntie Stacy pregnant rejected their daughter. Well, my mom was not going to stand by and watch her sister treated so badly because she made a mistake, so stole a little amount of money from her parents, and then ran away with her sister to live in the ghetto of another city close by. Painful still was the fact that their parents never bothered to go after them even when they learned of their whereabouts and their pitiable conditions. My mum did all she could to help feed them both while they were expecting the child, but the ghetto life was no place for two young girls from a religious background, and within 3 months, my Auntie Stacy suffered a miscarriage. They couldn't go back home at this point, and even if they did, they would not be welcomed, so they resigned to their fate. They both started adapting to the life of the ghetto while they looked for a means of survival. Within a short time, they had gathered up some money to send just one of them to college. My mom, who was ahead of my sister, had dropped out of college when she ran away to take care of her, but now the opportunity came. She asked my sister to reapply for college. That was how my mother gave up her academic pursuits for her sister. Auntie Stacy would always say that my mom gave her a second chance at life. Auntie Stacy, who still had a beauty that was captivating, quickly had boys flocking around her. But it wasn't difficult for Auntie Stacy, who had suffered the pain of deception and rejection from family and lover, to keep them at arm's length. She had learned her lesson in no bitter way, and she was not ready to walk down that path twice. Besides, she wouldn't want to disappoint my mum, who was still making sacrifices just to keep her in school. Auntie Stacy eventually graduated from law school and set up her law firm, which was beginning to gain a very good reputation in the city. She remained ever grateful to Mom, and she always looked for every means to show her appreciation. After her sister's graduation, my mum then decided to start paying some attention to herself. Up until that time, she had lived her life for Auntie Stacy. Mum began making plans to go into livestock farming, and that was when she moved over to the neighborhood, where she eventually met my dad, who was already plying his trade along that line. They got married informally, on my dad's farm, with Auntie Stacy and the neighbors as guests. Auntie Stacy was never really in support of her sister getting married. She was scared that her sister could fall into the wrong hands. Her own bitter experience had left her with a scar on the inside that constantly told her that all men are the same. Marriage was off the table. She had long decided not to get romantically involved with any man, and even when Mom tried getting to change her mind and consider accepting one out of the numerous suitors flocking around her, I would watch as Auntie Stacy would laugh and say that she was already married to my mom. She said Mom was her everything, and so she had no interest in marriage. Although she joked about it, her actions were in line with her words. Auntie Stacy would often call just to see how we were doing and if we needed any help. But even though Mummy usually said that everything was going on well, she would still send some money to us. She used Christmas as an opportunity to get us the things that we needed, knowing full well that my mom would have no other option than to accept it since it was Christmas. She got me clothes and toys because she knew my parents didn't have enough money to buy me these things very often. So now you can understand why I eagerly anticipated her coming. The last time when she came to visit, she had promised to take me back with her when next she came. I would be spending Christmas at her place. I couldn't wait. I knew that Christmas would be the best because Auntie Stacy was really fun to be with, and for the second time in my life, I would be spending Christmas outside our neighborhood, and I was certain that the experience would be better than the first. The first time I spent Christmas outside my neighborhood was at my dad's brother's place. Uncle Rick was a short, stout, and robust fellow who quickly forgot a promise soon after it was made. All through my life, he always broke the Christmas rule. I had celebrated Christmas with my parents 14 times, and in the whole of my 14 years, never for once did he bring along a present during any of his visits to our home. None for the kid, none for parents. He always ate and drank all that was available. He even took some while going home. It was clear that he loved the Christmas period because it was a means for him to feed off people. He just loved taking advantage of the generosity of people during this period. When visiting, he came empty, but when leaving, he left with his stomach filled to stupor and some of the meals well packaged. The only thing he ever left behind were promises. Promises he never intended to fulfill. I had seen this attitude over the years that I eventually lost any excitement when he was around. I knew that he was only there for himself. Each time Mom suggested visiting him for the first time, he always found a way of evading it. Dad was not surprised. He knew his brother too well. My dad and Uncle Rick grew up fighting because Uncle Rick always seemed to want the things that belonged to Dad. They were the only children of their parents who were very prosperous farmers who supplied their farm produce to various industries in the city. Uncle Rick was very cunning right from the start. Even though they were both expected to help out on the farm, Uncle Rick never seemed interested. There were times that he would pretend to be down with an illness so that he would not be asked to help out, and if he ever went on errands, that was because there was something in it for him, or he was just trying to impress a girl. He would oftentimes be seen helping out a lady with certain chores which he never did at home. He was known to be fond of ladies. Although Uncle Rick hated working on the farm, his parents knew that he loved negotiating things to suit him, so they decided that they were going to be taking him along each time that they went to the city to sell their products so that he could learn how to put his negotiation power to good use. There was a time when they were to make a trip to the city very early the next morning, but Uncle Rick suddenly developed a fever by night, so he had to stay back. My dad was to take cards of him and equally supervise the people working on the farm, so after their parents left, my dad quickly prepared something for Uncle Rick before going to the farm. While it was noon, he hurriedly left the farm to go and attend to Uncle Rick. On getting home, he began hearing funny noises from Uncle Rick's room. Fearing that the fever may have escalated to something worse, he quickly rushed into the room, and to his amazement, he found Uncle Rick and a girl making out. In the heat of the moment, they had forgotten to lock the doors. While the lady hurriedly put on her clothes, Uncle Rick wore a smile. He knew that even though Dad was angry, wasn't going to sell him out. Although Dad kept quiet about what had happened, he made up his mind never to fall prey to Uncle Rick's schemes. It was when Uncle Rick turned 28 that he decided to follow in the footsteps of my father and break away from his parents to establish a business. His parents did give him all the support that he needed, just like they had given to my dad. But while my dad chose to relocate to a small and quiet neighborhood to start his life, Uncle Rick decided to go to the city, and no one was ever really certain the kind of business that he had established. One thing which my dad did know, however, was the fact that Uncle Rick broke away from his parents so he could have the liberty of living the kind of lifestyle that he has always loved, without being reprimanded for it. Even though he seemed to keep in touch with my family, he always seemed secretive about himself. It was during Christmas last year when he visited us and heard Auntie Stacy telling my mom that she wanted the whole of us to come to spend the new year at her place, that he immediately sighed and said that it was exactly what he wanted, telling my parents. My dad wasn't going to fall for his lies, so he immediately told him that we would be accepting his invitation over that of Auntie Stacy. He told Auntie Stacy that she could have us as her guests the following year. Uncle Rick, who never saw my dad's response coming, now knew there was no way he could keep us from his place this time around. We got to his place on New Year's Eve, and my expectant uncle was already waiting to receive us. His place was nice, far better than our home. I couldn't believe that the very uncle who never gave anyone a dime could live in such a beautiful house. When we got in, a beautiful lady was already preparing dinner, and it was at the dining table that Uncle Rick introduced her as his fiancée. You could see the pride in Uncle Rick's voice as he held her from behind while planting a kiss on her chin, a gesture that was meant to show us that she was all his. Dad knew nothing about the women in his brother's life, but I heard him tell Mummy later on that night that he hopes this lady has come to stay. This lady was nice to us throughout our stay there. She made sure that we were comfortable in every way, and the way she carried herself, my parents rightly guessed that she was from a family who belonged to the high class. It was no wonder my uncle was full of pride. She was way out of his league. One thing that seemed to bother my dad, though, was the fact that Uncle Rick could afford the kind of luxury that he enjoyed. He knew that Uncle Rick couldn't have made so much money in a short period of time. Besides, the fact that Uncle Rick always demanded food which he could take back home with him each time he came visiting, easily suggested that he was not financially buoyant. As our time at Uncle Rick's place drew to a close, Dad was forced to ask him about the kind of business he was into, as we hadn't seen him leave the house for work since we came. When Dad finally asked him about it, he just laughed and said it was a discussion for next time. The day of our departure finally arrived, and while we were getting set to leave, we suddenly heard a loud bang on the door. It sounded the second time, and we all rushed out to see what was wrong. When we got there, we saw a lady who was pregnant, demanding to see Uncle Rick. She was already going around the house screaming his name, and when Uncle Rick's girlfriend demanded that this pregnant lady leave her house, a fight immediately ensued. Although this lady was pregnant, she quickly subdued my uncle's girlfriend and almost gave her the beating of her life if not for the timely intervention of my mom and Dad. While they were being separated, this pregnant lady began calling my uncle's girlfriend a husband snatcher who uses her ill-gotten wealth to steal people's husbands. We were all carried away that we failed to realize that Uncle Rick had left the house. It took a while before my parents got both parties to calm down. That was when the pregnant lady revealed that she had fed and accommodated Uncle Rick, who had promised her marriage for 2 years. Within those 2 years, Uncle Rick always found it difficult getting a job, but he never found it difficult getting drunk and bringing ladies into her own house. She had put up with it because she loved him and they would soon get married. But he recently moved out of the house after she got pregnant. She tried all her best to reach him, but he just kept on avoiding her. The pregnant lady had barely finished speaking when Uncle Rick's girlfriend broke down and started shedding tears. She claimed that she never knew Uncle Rick was engaged to be married. She said she met him about 6 months ago and he proposed to her a day after Christmas. It was after she said yes to him that she asked him to move in with her. I watched from my corner as Uncle Rick's girlfriend, who was visibly broken, said she couldn't bear the shame of telling her parents and everyone that her fiancé was expecting a child from someone else. We all felt bad for these ladies. It was now clear to my parents that the only reason Uncle Rick may have proposed to this lady was so he could move in with her and get us to believe everything we saw was his. My dad had his question answered. Uncle Rick was jobless and he lived off of hardworking women. I don't really know what Dad and Mom may have said to those ladies, but it was clear that the situation was far from settled as Uncle Rick was nowhere to be seen. We returned back to our small neighborhood that day, and I knew that I never wanted a holiday like that. No one had from Uncle Rick for a while, and every attempt to reach him proved abortive. However, news soon came from my grandparents who called Dad to inform him that Uncle Rick suddenly returned home looking haggard. He came back pay-handed, and so it was clear he didn't have a means of livelihood. His parents wondered at what happened to the money he was given, and all the claims of establishing a business. When my dad was informed about his brother's whereabouts, he decided to go visit his parents to inform them of the pitiable situation in which Uncle Rick had put two innocent ladies. He began making arrangements to travel down with my mom, but because my school had not yet resumed, they deliberated on taking me along or sending me over to Auntie Stacy's place to stay for the few days that they would be gone. I was very excited at the idea of staying with Auntie Stacy. I knew that it was going to be the best time of my life. Auntie Stacy always treated me like a daughter, and even though she had promised to take me with her when her next holiday arrived, I knew that she would be as glad as I did to have me come over to her place. My excitement soon came to an end when it was decided that I would be going with them to visit my grandparents. They had only seen me a few months after I was born, and since I didn't really know them, my parents saw this as an opportunity for a reunion. When I tried convincing them to send me over to Auntie Stacy's place, they said that she had resumed work and I would simply be a burden to her, and besides, we would all be going to her place during the next holiday. When we got to my grandparents' home, I was fascinated by what I saw. Although I knew that they were farmers, I never expected them to be much more organized than my parents. I had never seen such a level of mechanized farming in the whole of our neighborhood. They had a large expanse of farmland that was more than half the size of our neighborhood. There was a section for livestock, and they had people assigned to each section. As a result of my background, I never thought that my father could have an inheritance, how much more, an inheritance of this magnitude. My grandparents immediately fell in love with me. Most of their workers who had been around for long came to greet my dad, and I heard them say that they hoped he was back to stay. While all that was going on, my eyes spotted my uncle, who was passing glances at a lady who looked like a worker. My mind quickly drifted to the reason why we actually came. Dad had promised the lady who was pregnant for Uncle Rick that he would help get in touch with his brother and ensure he takes responsibility for the child once it's born. It was after dinner that my parents and grandparents began discussing. I overheard Dad telling them that Uncle Rick only returned home to avoid the problem that he had created for himself. Dad rehearsed the incident that took place between both ladies, and I could hear my grandpa sigh in disappointment. Even though it was a custom for Uncle Rick to embarrass the family, he just seemed to be getting worse by the day. A few days after he came home, Grandpa overheard him telling a lady that he was the heir to all of the farm and he would make her his wife if only she slept with him. The lady was quickly sent away. By morning, my grandparents gathered my mom and dad, and Uncle Rick together. Granddad asked Uncle Rick if the news of him impregnating a lady was true, and he quickly attested to it. When asked what he intended doing about the lady and her unborn child, Uncle Rick simply said that he wasn't ready for marriage, neither was he ready to be a father, but that he would use his own share of inheritance to take care of the mother and child, and ensure that they lived a comfortable life. At this point, Grandma broke down and started crying as she called her son a good-for-nothing moron. I watched from a distance as my mom quickly rushed to console her. Uncle Rick didn't seem the least disturbed. He was indeed a moron. It was agreed that the pregnant lady who had lost her job would be brought to live with Uncle Rick and his parents until she delivers her baby, after which she would be given some capital to go back and start up a business that would take care of her and the child. We were getting ready to leave that morning when Granddad called in the family lawyer. He asked that we didn't leave yet until he was done with his lawyer. After a lengthy session with the lawyer, he finally gathered his family to him. This time around, I was equally called in. Granddad began by thanking everyone for being by his side all these years. He then started praising his wife, who had always pushed him to keep going further even when there was little progress in sight. I could see the gratitude in his eyes as he says that if he had another life, he would choose to spend it with her over and over again. He then proceeded to thank my dad for putting in his best in the past to ensure that the family business was thriving. When he got to Uncle Rick's turn, what seemed like a vote of thanks turned to a note of regret. He started recounting all the privileges which were given to Uncle Rick and how he took them for granted. He spoke about how Uncle Rick would always team up with some workers behind his back to sell some of the produce, only to lavish them on women, and even though Granddad knew all along He allowed him to have his way because he thought it would finally make him committed to the family business. He went further to remind Uncle Rick in the presence of everyone present of how he had almost used the farmland as a surety when he wanted to gamble. I listened as Granddad spoke with hurt about how Uncle Rick took a huge loan from the bank, in the name of the family, only to squander it on the gambling table, and Granddad had to repay the loan when the banks came calling. He spoke about the huge sum of the money they had given Uncle Rick when he said he wanted to establish a business in the city, only to end up getting a lady pregnant, and almost ruining the life of another. What was most painful at this point was the fact that Uncle Rick didn't seem to show any sign of remorse. He just wore a look that clearly said that he didn't care. Grandpa now got to the main reason why he had gathered us. He told us that he had just rewritten his will, and he wanted us to equally hear it from him. He then proceeded to say that all of the family's properties, investment, and even the farm, had been willed to my dad. My dad was to relocate with his family, from the small neighborhood where we lived, into the family house, and he was to take over the reins of leadership from Granddad immediately. Granddad said he and his wife were retiring from the business. They would sit back and enjoy the rest of their years in peace and comfort. He then stated that from henceforth, Uncle Rick was to move out of the house, and if he wished to still live there, he would only live as a worker. He would live with the other workers and he would be paid the same amount as the other workers are paid. The inheritance that Uncle Rick had long anticipated was now taken from him. Worse still, was the fact that the privileges that he once enjoyed as a son would be taken away from him, as he was now faced with the only option of being a worker who would have to work like everyone else just to survive. Uncle Rick was stunned. He looked like he had just been hit by a rock. He initially thought that it was a joke, until Granddad immediately issued a disclaimer to the public, stating that Uncle Rick no longer had any rights to negotiate on any business on behalf of the family. On our way back to our neighborhood, I watched as Mom told Auntie Stacy over the phone about how our fortune had immediately turned. Auntie Stacy was elated. She was really pleased with the way Granddad handled the situation. She had never really been a fan of Uncle Rick, and since she had once fallen victim to a man, she detested men who took advantage of women. Although she was glad Uncle Rick got served what he deserved, she was even happier for her sister who had chosen to love a man, even when she initially didn't know that he had an inheritance of such magnitude. News quickly spread around the small community about what had happened, and it was clear that everyone was going to miss us. On the day when we were about to leave the community, everyone gathered to say goodbye, and although I was certain that I would be more comfortable in any grandparents' place, I soon found myself shedding tears. I was leaving the place where I had lived my whole life. All I had learned in life, the friends I had made, were all in this neighborhood, and even though I was saying goodbye, I knew I would carry with me lots of memories that I would cherish. We got back to my grandparents' place and we easily began settling in. Uncle Rick had run away because he couldn't stand the shame and ridicule, but Granddad knew that he would be back sooner than expected. Meanwhile, I was told to move into the room that once belonged to him. Everyone was very friendly to my mom and me, as my dad already had a good reputation among most of them. But Dad was not going to let me become lazy simply because I now had better privileges. Dad made it clear to me that I would be working just the same way I did when we lived in the neighborhood. It didn't really bother me because the way the farming system was organized here seemed to really fascinate me, and so I wouldn't mind spending time on the farm after school, just to see what more was in stock. This would really keep me engaged while I waited for Christmas Day. Hey guys, would you still work on the farm if you had this new privilege of mine, or would you spend it doing other things? I would love to know your thoughts on this.
This story takes place in the heart of France, Paris. Paris is one of the most romantic places ever to exist. They call it the city of love. Is it really, though? I am Iris, and this month I'll be turning 18-year-old. I was born, and I have lived all my life in Paris. When talking about Paris, the thing that comes to our mind is Eiffel Tower, streets crowded with tourists, beautiful little coffee shops, and the list goes on. However, what people don't know is that one of Paris's best-kept secrets is the countryside. That's where I live. It's a tiny piece of heaven tucked away in the 20th arrondissement of Paris known as La Campagne, Paris. I love where I live. The views are straight from a movie. Each building is unique and quirky with gentle pastel colors and paved, cobbled paths. It's nothing like the rest of Paris. In a good way. Life is easy here. My school is only some blocks away from my house. My friends' houses are near too. But the most awkward thing about where I live is that my neighbor is my ex-boyfriend. His name is Louis. Louis was great in everything that a girl could ask for. A great smile, tall, respectful. But he was too good. When I see that the person I'm dating is way too much into me, I tend to stand back. We never argued, and there was never drama. And this kind of makes me get bored of it. I want my relationship to be exciting, with ups and downs, as it should be. I want someone to disagree with me, not just agree with everything I say, like they don't have an opinion on their own. However, I don't know if I can call him my ex-boyfriend because it was more like just a summer fling. We dated the whole of last summer. I get a feeling that he is still not over me. But what can I do? I get bored so easily. And it's actually a serious problem. Do you know that feeling when you are in summer and feel so vulnerable? You feel like you are free to do anything. A new hair color, a new tattoo, a new piercing, sometimes even a new boyfriend. Ugh, I miss summer right now. Winters can be so depressive. And I can't even wear what I want to wear. I love wearing crop tops and letting my stomach out a little bit. This is the last year of high school. Next year, God knows where I'll be because I still don't even know what I want to study in college. However, I am excited for this year. We have prom, and also I have to pass my driving license. I hope Louis doesn't ask me to be his prom date because that would be awkward. I don't know about the country you live in, but prom is usually the night for couples to lose their virginities here. I wouldn't wait for prom night, but I still haven't found someone special yet. Call me old-fashioned, but I don't want to lose my virginity with someone like Louis. For example, I aspire to have some deep-level connections with someone. Every day is the same day at our school. It's like déjà vu. All over again. But, one day, one random Thursday, a new boy came into my class. He walked and then sat without even starting at anyone. He was tall, dark-skinned, curly hair. The teacher made him introduce himself. Apparently, his name is Aaron. During the lunch break, all the girls were all over him. I knew this would happen. But I am not this kind of girl. I like to look uninterested. That's my secret to making someone interested in me. Days went by, and we didn't even talk. But I could notice some stares here and there. I saw how he was talking to the other girls. And I could tell that he wasn't just like any other guy. He was mysterious until one day, Aaron decided to come out of his shell and actually talk to me. He goes, "Where can I eat something good around here?" I told him about my favorite place where I get food every day. He said, "Wanna ditch the classes and go eat something?" How could I say no? I wanted to know about this guy. He said to meet outside. I went outside of school. And here he was, waiting for me, smiling. We started walking and talking. There was a vibe already. We go into the store and sit on the corner by the window. Then he orders for me without even asking what I'd want. He said, "Trust me." That was attractive. We talked about our favorite movies, our first kisses and so on. I didn't notice how many hours had passed until my mother called me. We decided to leave. He put his hand around my waist and whispered in my ear, "See ya." My walk home had me questioning myself. Why didn't he ask for my number? Guys usually ask for my number immediately. Maybe he truly was different from the other guys. It had been days since our little date. And we didn't even share a word at school. I was avoiding him in the hallway at this point. Then, someone texted me. A text said, "Same spot. At 2 p.m. Was that Aaron? Well, yeah, for sure. I was in a dilemma about going or not. I decided to go there. He was sitting on the same spot as that day. I went inside, and he gave me a little kiss on the cheek. It got me off guard. He had already ordered for me again. This time, he asked if I had a boyfriend. And I said no. I didn't ask him. And he said, "Don't you want to know if I have a girlfriend?" I said, "Do you?" He said not yet and started smiling. Aaron said, "You're gonna go to prom with me," and started smiling. I didn't say anything. I just laughed it off, trying to play it cool. He was staying a little bit too near me. I could smell his perfume, and I could feel the warmth of his breath as he was talking to me. At this point, I just wanted him to kiss me. But he didn't. That's how our second date ended. As I was walking home, I saw Louis, the ex. He said that he wanted to talk to me, and I said sure. He started holding my hand, asking me to go to prom with him. I said no and told him that I'd made plans with someone else. He seemed angry and wanted to know who the guy was. "Why would you care?" I said. He said that he wanted to know so he could fight the guy. I immediately started laughing, but he seemed to be talking seriously. Knowing that Louis probably still loves me, I was worried. I was worried about what would happen. I didn't want anything to affect my relationship with Aaron. We had a good start. It was almost prom night, and everyone was starting to freak out. I still didn't have any idea of what I was gonna wear. As I talked with my girls about some dresses, I got a text. Aaron had texted me saying, "Meet me after school." So, that's what I did. We met. He said that today we're going to find our prom outfits. At first, I was like no. But then he got me into it. We went to a couple of stores. And nothing. It was my time to try for some dresses. He was the one picking the dresses for me. Every time I went out from the wardrobe with a dress, Aaron had this look on his face. It was clear that he liked me. There was a lot of tension between us. We both could feel it. Then, I came across a black dress with an open leg. I tried it, and I loved it. It was time to show it to Aaron. You should have seen his face. He was speechless. He came near me and said, "This is the one," and kissed me. I think my cheeks got red for a second. Then, it was his turn to try for a suit. Every time he was trying suits, he would come out shirtless. He was showing off. But I loved it. We got our clothes, and I could say that it was one of the best dates I've ever been with. The day of the prom came, and here I was, getting ready. Aaron was waiting outside my house. But then he came inside because he wanted to say hi to my parents. He was looking so good. I just wanted to kiss him, but I couldn't in front of my parents. The moment we got in the car, we gave each other a little kiss. We arrived at prom, and everyone was looking at us. I heard that Louis couldn't find a date. I saw him. He was standing in a corner alone. I felt bad for a second. Hours went by, and Aaron and I were having the best time. Aaron is so easy to stay with. As we were slow dancing, I saw Louis coming at us. He pushed Aaron to the ground. Aaron seemed confused. He didn't know who Louis was. He heard me saying, "Louis, stop." Aaron said, "You know this fool," and then he punched him in the face. The security got us out, and I was shaking. I told him who Louis was, but he didn't seem to care. He was just worried if I was okay. So, basically, Louis got so jealous he decided to do this. But he didn't ruin our prom night. Things just got better from there. I realized how mature Aaron is and that I could love him. We weren't allowed to get back at prom. So we got to the car. Aaron said, "I got an idea. Let's get to my place." He said that he was home alone. It was too early to end this night. So we went to his home. We stayed in our prom outfits and decided to watch a movie. He was touching my hair and kissing my forehead. We both fell asleep in that way. We got up at the sound of my mother calling me. So, he drove me home. As I was walking to the door of my house, I saw Louis there. He was talking to my parents. What could he be saying? Sorry for last night. He better be. I got closer, and I noticed that my parents were angry. My mother said to me, "Get in the house," as Louis ran to his home. Apparently, Louis told my parents that I spent my night at a guy's house. How could he know? He probably stalked us. He is a psycho. I had no other solution than to tell my parents the truth. If I told them that I didn't do anything bad, they still wouldn't believe me. They said to me, "You're grounded." They took my phone and said that I wasn't allowed to go out before and after school. How could I keep in touch with Aaron? I was so mad at Louis. I bagged the door and fell asleep. The next day came. It felt like forever. I was excited to meet with Aaron. We meet up, and I tell him everything that has happened. He said that he wanted to fight Louis, but I begged him not to. Aaron said that it's for the best if he goes and talks with my parents. He insisted. I said, all right, why not? I told my mother that Aaron wanted to talk to them, and she asked me to call him for dinner at our house. So, that is what we did. My parents seemed to love him. Well, who couldn't love him? We had so much fun. My mother said that it's okay if I sleep over at Aaron's since his parents are working at night. I was surprised she let me. But I guess they noticed what kind of a guy Aaron is. So, we went to his house. We both could sense that we felt a little nervous, like something would happen. We started kissing, and then he went, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I kissed him instead of an answer. Things led to another. And we did it. We were closer than never now. I felt safe. We said our first, I love yous. I love the fact that he was the first one that said it. Even though we are in our teenage years, I know for sure that love will always be between us two. We are excited to see what life brings ahead of us. There's nothing better than being free, young, and in love.
Guys, I am Rona, and I just turned 16-year-old. I wanted to take a minute from my chaotic life and tell you this. A piece of my life. Everyone has their own story, and I do too. I come from the tiny city of Kosovo, Gjilin. I love Gjilin. I have spent all of my life here. But Gjilin doesn't have a lot to offer. I always dreamt that I would do something big in my life. I have dreams that I can't do here. And that's where my story takes place. I have just graduated high school, and I am so ready to take the world. I have always shown a love for art since I was a kid. I could literally draw before I could talk. I love everything related to art. I love going to museums. I love losing myself in paintings. And that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to go to an art school. But there is a problem. There isn't any art school in Gjilin. But there is one big art school just an hour away, in Pristina. And that's where I want to go and pursue my dream. I live with my parents, grandparents, and 2 little sisters. At first, I was so afraid to tell my family that I wanted to go to Pristina. My parents work, but they don't earn as much as we need. My mother is a janitor at a bank, and my father is a taxi driver. If I decide to go to Pristina, I have to live there. I have to eat there. I have to pay for my school there. Plus, Pristina is way more expensive than my city. I know that my parents can't afford to send me there, even though they have always tried their best for us. But I want to go there. I want to spend the rest of my life doing something I love and enjoy. One day, as I was scrolling on my phone, I came across some news. The art school applications had started, and there weren't so many places left. It is not easy to get into this school. You must be very talented, but I believe I am. I felt like I was just wasting my time, so I decided to tell my parents about my plan. They told me that we couldn't afford it with their eyes full of tears. I felt bad and angry at the same time. That day I spent the whole evening crying. It felt like I was going to lose my dream forever. Then, my grandparents came into my room and tried to talk to me, saying that everything would be just fine. And they were right. Things took place. They gave me some very good news. They had saved money for years and wanted to give them to me to pay for my school. I didn't want to take their money, I felt bad. But they insisted. They said, "We are old. Our lives had already ended. You have a whole future ahead of you. Take our money and go follow your dreams." Why are grandparents the kindest people in the entire world? I couldn't refuse the money. I told my parents about it, and they were so happy. I decided that the next day I would apply to the school. The next day had come, and that's what I did. I took the bus to Pristina. I was nervous and shaking until I saw the test. It was easy. The results would take only 3 days. It was the most stressful 3 days of my life. A million questions ran through my mind, and I was overthinking everything. What would I do if I can't get in? I'd be in a complete depression. But one morning, I got an email. Guess what? I got in. I felt so happy and excited. My dream was only some steps away. But I didn't know that things would get more challenging and complicated. Now I had to find a place to live in Pristina and some part-time job to pay rent and my food. After some research, I had found a very cute little flat that was only some minutes away from the art school. But the rent was so expensive. It would take 2 people to pay for it. I couldn't find a roommate. My friends had already found their roommates. As I was searching for a job near my school, I had across an announcement that somebody had made. The announcement had said they needed a roommate near the place where I wanted to take the flat. So, I called that number. The person agreed to share the flat with me and pay the rent together. But there was only one problem. That person was a boy. At first, I didn't want to agree, but the school would start next week. I didn't have time to think. I decided not to tell my family about this because they would get the wrong ideas. Plus, I was sure that I would never see that guy. I'd be busy. I would be busy with school and studying. Plus, I had already applied for a part-time job at a coffee shop. That means that I will not have any contact with him whatsoever. The time had come for me to get out of my nest and become an adult. It was moving day. I packed as much as I could. I love to cook, so I brought a lot of stuff with me, some sauces that my mother made, and some other stuff. I decided to meet up with the guy and get the keys to our flat. I didn't even know his name and how he looked. It could be anyone. He could be a killer. A psychopath? All I know is that he is going to the same school as I am, art school. I arrived there, and at the door of our flat, a boy was waiting there. He had suitcases. It was him. I felt shy when I first saw him. He was so tall, and he looked so aesthetic. His style was out of this world. His name was Eddie. We got into the flat. There were only 2 rooms and a living room. Our rooms were small and very near to each other. There was an old, cute tiny kitchen. We spent that whole day cleaning the flat and getting to know each other. I really felt like I could be best friends with Eddie. Eddie, the flat, and everything had good vibes. My parents had called me 3 times in just some hours. I still hadn't told them that my roommate was a boy. Eddie was an artist too. I had the chance to see some of his works, and they were mind-blowing. We noticed that we had some classes together, and we were glad. It's hard to start school without a friend. I slept so well the first night, like I was in my own house. But I had to wake up. A big day was ahead of me. The first day of school. I was in my PJ, scrolling through my phone, going to the bathroom. I forgot I was sharing the flat with someone. I ran into Eddie. He was going to the bathroom too. I got ready and arrived on the first day. The school was so beautiful and big. There were a lot of talented students there, and I could tell there was going to be competition. I can't say much about the first day because we didn't do much. After school, I had to go to my job at the coffee shop. I noticed that the coffee shop didn't have much work for me. Good for me. But the boss was so respectful. It was such a long day. I got tired and just wanted to sleep. I saw that Eddie was cooking in the kitchen when I got in. He goes, "I hope you like spaghetti." I was so surprised that he had cooked for me too. Plus, I love spaghetti. We talked about how our day went. I couldn't help but think how Eddie is the sweetest person that I've ever come across. I thought that it would be weird living with a guy, but I loved it. Eddie was making it so easy. Weeks went by, and everything was just fine. I visited my parents every weekend, but every time I would come back to Jylin, I would actually miss Eddie so much. We were getting so close with each other. We would draw together and talk about stuff that I had never talked about before with anyone. We would watch TV all night on our crappy couch and our crappy television. One night we actually fell asleep on our couch together, and when we woke up, we felt so shy. There were moments when I felt like we could actually like each other. One day I came back from work, and I saw Ed was painting a drawing. The living room was a total mess, and he was shirtless. He was all covered in paint and was smiling. That smile got me feeling like I could actually be into him. I got back from work one day, and I noticed that Ed wasn't home. He usually was home. I decided to make noodles for the both of us, since all we had been eating was pasta and fast food, and decided to wait for him to watch a movie together. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door, and it was Eddie. Eddie wasn't alone this time, he was with a girl. They were holding hands and laughing. He introduced me to her. She was so beautiful. She had long, sexy legs and hair. They didn't sit to watch the movie. They went and got into his room. Then Ed texts me saying, "Can you go out for a little bit?" I don't know why I felt so jealous and angry. I went out and didn't come back for some hours. I didn't want to disturb them. Then, I got home, and Ed was sitting on the couch. I didn't want to talk. I went to my room. I couldn't sleep but think. I was thinking about how I left my dream behind. I was lost spending time with Eddie, and all this time he had a girlfriend, and he didn't tell me. So, I decided that I would focus more on school from that night. That's what I came for, after all. Weeks went by, and we were communicating so cold. I did my best to avoid him. I tried not to be home all the time just to not see him. One day my parents came to my place in Pristina. I didn't know, and I wasn't home. Plus, they didn't know that my roommate was actually a guy. Ed had texted me that day saying that I should come home. I thought something bad had happened. I went home, and there they were, my parents. They were talking with Eddie, and then Eddie went outside. My parents were angry that I didn't tell them, but then they understood that I had no other choice. They had come to visit me with some bad news. My grandmother had died, and my heart broke into pieces. I couldn't believe it. I decided to go home to Jylin for a week to stay with my family during these hard times. I didn't communicate with Ed that whole week. A week went by, and it was time for me to follow the dream. I remember saying to myself that I would work even harder now for my grandmother. She wanted me to finish school. I went back to Pristina, and there Ed was. Eddie was feeling so sad about my grandmother. He made me cry with his words. We started hugging. I didn't know how much I needed that hug until we hugged. He was holding my face telling me that everything was going to be fine, and then kissed me. I stood back, confused. I asked him about that mysterious girl that he was the other day. He said that that was nothing serious and that he liked me. I liked him too, but I didn't want to admit it. The following day I woke up to the noises of some suitcases. Eddie was leaving and saying that he got a job as an artist and would take a break from school for a year. Was it too late to confess my love for him? Was it too late to say to him that he shouldn't be going? I decided not to say a word, but I know for sure that I will miss him. He said that he would be back within a year. Till then, I will be working for my dream. And if Ed was meant—
My name is Art and I have just turned 18-year-old. I wanted to share something that had happened and hopefully you don't make the same mistake that I did. I was born and raised in Pristina. I have always lived with my parents and my little brother. But now that I had turned 18-year-old, it was time for me to get out of the house. I was ready to live on my own and make my own rules. Plus, my parents don't understand that I need my space. My parents still treat me like I am a baby, but I am not. They are the sweetest parents and they care about me, but I just couldn't continue this way. My mother doesn't work, but my father owns the biggest shoe company. I love working there. I have been working with my father since I was 10 years old. Maybe I didn't do much back then, but I just loved being there with my father and seeing what he does. My father works very hard and we have always had a beautiful, easy life because of him. That's why I moved out. I work and I have my own money. But my place is very near my parents' house. They visit me almost every day. It has been months since I have been living alone and I love it. Everything is easier and I can do whatever I want to. At first, I only lived eating noodles and fast food. But I have been watching some cooking show videos and I have learned a lot. I am not going to school this year. I decided to take a gap year and make some money. My parents hate this fact, but I can't work if I go to school. My parents don't understand how the world works nowadays. Nowadays it's essential if you have money, especially being a boy. If you don't work and have money, it's hard to keep a girlfriend too. However, I never had a problem with girls. In my school, they used to call me Casanova. And that's what my story is about. Girls. Girls are trouble, and everybody knows this. They are the devil itself, but we're still crazy about them, right? In Pristina, there are a lot of beautiful and hot girls. Some of them are easy to catch, and some aren't. 3 months ago, I was scrolling through my Instagram feed and I came across a girl named Rita. Her photos were breathtaking and she looked so beautiful. I decided to follow her. I take care of my Instagram because girls will not follow you back if you don't have good pictures. She followed me back, so I decided to text her. She was from the city too, but I had never seen her before. I texted Rita a lot and she seemed such a fun person. After 1 week, I asked to see her live. At first, she kept saying that it was too early for us to meet. But what if you are photoshopping your pics and you don't turn out to be how I wanted? I don't judge girls on their looks, but I don't want someone to lie to my face. You can never trust social media nowadays. I'd rather see her live and see if we vibe and not waste time. So, that's what Rita and I did. We met. I went to her place and picked her up. I was driving my dad's car since I still didn't have my own. My dad has a fast and expensive car and girls love it. Rita loved it too. When we met, Rita seemed a little bit shy. I couldn't tell if that was her personality or it was because of the first time seeing each other. It's understandable to be shy and excited on the first date. But Rita looked even better than in the photos. She was blonde, tall, skinny, and had a beautiful smile with perfect teeth. She was my type. We went to a sushi place and we both enjoyed our little date. Days went by and I had already asked her for another date. We could go to my place or I don't know, whatever she would like. But Rita had very strict parents and they didn't let her go out as often as she wanted. Plus, she had brothers. She was afraid that her brothers would find out that she was going out with me. Brothers are very overprotective over their sisters. So, I didn't insist on going out. I tried to understand her. Plus, I didn't want to deal with her brothers. But, I am only 18-year-old and I am not looking for a serious relationship. I am still young to settle down. I have my whole life ahead of me. It's hard to enjoy life while being in a serious relationship. Rita couldn't go out with me, but I could go with other girls. I mean, why not? I have nothing to lose. This time, a girl followed me. Girls never follow first, and that was strange to me. I followed her back to see who she was. Her name was Tatiana. Just by reading her name, she sounded so hot and beautiful to me. She accepted my following request so fast. She had over 80 posts. She clearly enjoys her life. I stalked her, and it looked like she was some years older than me. I didn't want to text her immediately. She was the first one to follow me, and I was just curious if she would be the first one to text too. After some days, that's what she did. We texted, and I learned a lot about her. Apparently, she is from Germany, but she is on her winter vacation here in Pristina. She said she was here for some months only, staying at her family's place. I thought to myself, some months are enough for me to go out with this girl. I was still texting Rita, but that didn't mean that I was in a relationship. So, I decided to ask Tatiana out. It had been only some hours since I started texting with her, but we decided to meet. I told Rita that I went to sleep early that night since she was texting to me non-stop. She didn't have to know. I met up with Tatiana. She had black hair and was a little bit shorter than me. It was January, but she wore a very short dress and high boots. I could tell that she had been in a tan salon. Tatiana was completely a different type from Rita. Was it possible to like two types of girls at the same time? It was a little late and we had no idea where to go. She knew that I was living alone, so she said that we could go to my place. I am the one who usually tells girls to go to my place. But we went to my place. We talked and talked for hours. Tatiana was a very open-minded girl and not shy at all. I loved that. She was the first one to kiss me. It is so hot when the girl makes the first move. But we stopped at the kiss. It had been weeks since I was texting Rita and Tatiana. Rita and I had our first kiss too. It had been my first-month anniversary of Rita and me and Tatiana. There were times that I felt guilty talking to both of them at the same time. But I liked them both. They were so different and I liked this fact. What Rita didn't have, Tatiana did. What Tatiana didn't have, Rita did. I was having a great time with both of them. I could make time for everything. But there were times when Rita would ask to look through my phone. I'd tell her that we should just end it all if she didn't trust me. There were times when Tatiana would call me and I'd be with Rita. But thank God, none of them didn't find out about this. It had been 3 months and there was 1 week left until Valentine's Day. I was hoping that Rita couldn't go out that day or Tatiana. I can't go out with both of them. At first, I didn't talk to any of them about Valentine's Day. But they were the ones that kept talking and making plans. I couldn't say no. This is where everything goes wrong. A new restaurant just got opened in our city and both of them said that it would be a great idea to go there for Valentine's. What a coincidence. At first, I panicked and I didn't know what to do. But then I got an idea. I thought to myself that I could go during the daytime with Rita and then during the night with Tatiana. Or either way, it didn't matter. Luckily, they agreed. Rita said that she could go out for Valentine's Day during the daytime. So that's what I will do. First I will go with Rita and then Tatiana. Valentine's Day had come and I started getting ready. I bought flowers for both of them and I wrote a cute little note. I was just waiting for Rita to tell me to go and pick her up. I was waiting and wasting time. She wasn't texting me back. Then, she called me saying that she couldn't go out immediately. She said that her brothers were there. I decided to wait, thinking that it would be only some minutes or something. But, no. She made me wait for 2 hours. It was almost time for me to go and pick up Tatiana. She was texting me and telling me that she was getting ready. She was sending me pics of her outfits and making me choose. God, she looked like a goddess in every dress. But I was sweating. The clock was ticking and it was time to go and pick up Tatiana. All of a sudden, Rita said that she could go out now. I went to her house without wasting time and we went to the restaurant. She looked beautiful and happy to see me. I put my phone on silent just in case Tatiana calls me. Rita and I ordered some food and we were just talking and enjoying our time. Suddenly, I get a text from Tatiana saying, "Where are you?" I needed to go and take her. I told Rita I had to go to the bathroom and I drove so fast that I almost had an accident. I picked her up and now I had to make sure that we would be sitting somewhere far from our table with Rita. I said to the restaurant owner that we wanted a private place. Luckily he found us one. I felt safe there. It was just Tatiana and me. I told her that I needed to go to the bathroom. I went immediately to Rita's. She was waiting for me. So I planned to stay some minutes at Rita's and then some minutes at Tatiana's without getting caught. I was getting tired from going back and forth but luckily they weren't noticing anything. I just wanted this night to be over. As I was staying with Rita, she said that she had to go to the bathroom. That was the perfect time for me to go and talk to Tatiana for a bit. But Tatiana wasn't there. Then, I saw both of them getting out of the bathroom. I panicked so hard and went outside for a cigarette. I was so scared. A million questions were running through my mind. Do they know each other? Was it just a coincidence that they were at the same time in the bathroom? I decided to think positively and go on with my night. I went to Tatiana's. And there she was. Rita was there too. I couldn't believe my eyes. I felt like I could faint, but I tried to play it cool. They were laughing with each other. The first thing that came out of my mouth was, "Do you guys know each other?" Tatiana spilled wine on my face and said yes. Both of them planned this whole Valentine's Day. They played me exactly how I played them. They said that they knew earlier that I was talking with both of them, but they were waiting on me to tell them the truth. Both of them seemed to be very heartbroken. It made me realize how wrong I was. I liked Rita and Tatiana, but now I had lost both of them. I didn't know what I was doing until I saw them together. That Valentine's Day made me a whole different person. Someone could have done the same thing to me. Someone could have done this to my mother, to my sister. I just wanted to share my story and tell everyone that you shouldn't be playing with people's feelings. Don't get into a relationship unless you're willing to commit.
Hi guys, my name is Bora, and I have just turned 16-year-old. I wanted to tell my story about what had happened to me some months ago. But first, you need to know more about me. I was born and raised in Pristina. My name, Bora, means snow in my language because I was born during the coldest winter days. I live with my parents and my 2 little sisters. Everyone says that it is fun to have sisters, but mine are crazy. My parents are the sweetest parents in the whole world, and they did the most so we could have a great life. My parents work all the time, and we are at school. My mom is a nurse, and she often works at night too. My dad is a fireman. They both save a life for a living. We barely get to see each other, but that's why vacation exists. The only vacation that we can have together as a family is during the summer. Every summer has its own story, mine too. This summer, we decided to take a 1-week vacation to the beautiful beaches of Albania. Albania is a very amazing country, and we go there every summer. There is so much to see and do. You have a lot of beaches that you can choose to visit. This time we decided that we were going to Ksamil. We had never been there before, and we were excited. We decided that we would go by car, even though it would be a long road from Pristina to there. But we didn't care, as long as we knew we were going to take some cold swims on Albania's most clear waters. Another reason why we decided to go there was because of a friend that I have. It had been a year since I had been texting with my internet friend. Her name is Anna. Anna is from Albania, and we had actually met last summer. We clicked immediately, and we have been texting since that day. We would FaceTime non-stop. My whole family knows about her, and everybody knows how much we love each other. She is the same age as me. When I told her that I would be coming to her country this summer too, she was so excited and said I should meet her. So my plan was to stay 4 days with my family, and then the last day I would go to Anna. My parents agreed. We all got ready for the long road journey ahead of us. I was sitting in the back seat of our car with my 2 little sisters. As always, they were so annoying, so I put on my headphones and listened to my favorite albums the whole road. There were times when I would fall asleep. I love falling asleep while on a road trip. It is so relaxing. After some long hours, we arrived at our destination. The sun was so bright, and it was a very hot day. My father was so tired from driving all day, but we girls were ready to spend some hours by the pool. I put on my favorite bikini. The weather was perfect, and there were many people there. We had so much fun on those first days of our vacation. We all needed that. But then it was time for me to go with my friend. My friend was in a different city in Albania, only some hours away. We planned that she would come and get me, but she couldn't come. I didn't want to bother my dad and mom and take hours from their vacation, so I decided to take the bus. Plus, we all talked the same language, so it wouldn't be hard for me to communicate. I got ready. I got my sunglasses, and I wore a sundress. I got only 1 bag with me, and some food for the road. I was so excited because Anna said she would show me some secret beaches that Albania has, and no one knows. Some hidden gems. I went to the bus station on foot, and I already got so tired because it was so hot outside. I arrived there and saw a lot of buses. At first, I didn't know which one to get in. But then I heard some man yelling the city's name that I would be going and pointing to a bus. So I went there. I got on the bus and told Anna immediately, so then she could wait for me when I got off the bus. There was even hotter there. It was an old bus, and it smelled terrible. There was only one old couple there, and they were eating something. Something that smelled so bad, I almost puked. Anna told me that it would take me 2 hours to arrive at her city. I knew that it would be a very long, challenging road trip. The road was bumpy, and I would put my face outside the window to feel some fresh air. But the views were crazy. The mountains were huge, and the sky was so blue. I could see the ocean from the bus, and I couldn't wait to get in the water. After a 40-minute drive, the bus stopped, and the old couple got off the bus. Then after 20 minutes, the man that was driving the bus told me that I had arrived at my destination. But Anna had said that it would take me 2 hours, and it had only been 1 hour. I tried to tell the man that I thought I was in the wrong place, but he said no. He was so rude and said that he needed to go somewhere else and that I needed to get out of the bus. I didn't have much time to think, and I went out of the bus. There was no one around me, just some mountains. I took my phone, and I tried to call Anna and tell her that I was there. But my phone wasn't working. I didn't have a connection. I didn't want to panic. I decided to wait there for some time and see if another bus would come. I waited till I couldn't wait any longer. It was so hot, and I couldn't even find a shadow. Then, I started walking, hoping to find a restaurant to even call someone. As I was walking, I came across a little village. It looked like a tiny neighborhood. It had only like 3 houses. But it looked so beautiful. I decided to go there and see if someone would help me. The houses were made of mud, and they were so old. They must have been built years ago. It was so silent, and at first, I thought that nobody lived there. But then I saw that there was a little farm. There were chickens, pigs, and then suddenly, I saw a big white horse. Near the animals, there was a well. There was a bucket in which you could take the water. I took some because I got so thirsty. It made me feel like old times. The water was cold, and it got me feeling much better. Still, I couldn't hear any track of humans. I was walking around the houses, trying to see if there was someone there from the windows. I decided to knock on one of the house's doors, but no one replied. Then, I went to another one near there. I heard someone walking slowly. Then, the door got opened. There was a very, very old woman. She seemed kind because she opened the door and her face was smiling. I asked her where I was. She said that I was in a whole different place rather than where I wanted. She said that I must have taken the wrong bus. I could barely understand what she was saying because she had no teeth. I felt so bad. I asked her about the nearest bus station, and she said that the buses don't come to this area because the roads are bad and bumpy. She said that they won't walk by the horse. I was surprised that people still use horses as vehicles. She said that her husband rides the horse. But he wasn't home. She insisted on me going to her house and waiting for her husband so that he could give me a ride. I had no other choice. They obviously didn't have phones, and there wasn't any connection. I couldn't call my family and tell them what had happened. So, I went in. The house was so tiny but so cute at the same time. The furniture was so old, and the television was barely working. We decided to stay outside on the balcony. The air was so fresh, and the view was beautiful. She made me some fresh orange juice from her garden and gave me some fresh fruits. She told me that everyone had left this village and that she and her husband were the only ones living there. I asked her about her kids, but she said that everyone had left and gone to the city. I felt bad. They must have been feeling so lonely. But, no. She was happy and full of life. The clock was ticking, and her husband wasn't coming back. She said he works all day and takes care of the corn. She said that he would be late and needed to stay and wait. So that's what I did. I was so hungry. Luckily, the old woman started making the dinner. I decided to help her. She wanted to make a traditional Albanian pie. So, I went to her garden and picked up some fresh onions. She was so old, but she was so strong. As the pie was baking, we had the chance to get to know each other better. It was getting darker, and we ate dinner. Her husband still wasn't home. There weren't any lights in the room, only some candles. I was looking through the windows, but I couldn't see anything. It was so dark. Suddenly, we heard the noise of a horse near the house. It was her husband, and he had come back. He was happy to have someone over. He was very kind. He seemed very tired, but he didn't miss the chance to kiss his wife. They looked like they were so in love with each other. But there was some bad news. He said that he couldn't ride the horse at night because it was dangerous. He said that we had to wait till the sun rises. But that would have meant that it would be a whole day without my family contact me. I had no other choice but spent the night there. I felt safe there because the old couple seemed like the nicest people. They made me a place to sleep in their living room. They slept so early. So, I was all night up and scared. It was so dark. There was only one candle. I missed my family, and my phone battery had died. The old couple had woken up very early. They called me and said they were ready to give me a ride. I had slept on my sundress, and I hadn't brushed my teeth or hair. I didn't care, and I went out that way. I felt so sorry that I had to leave that old woman alone. She needed someone. She hugged me so tight and kissed my forehead. She said that she would like to see me again, anytime soon. I got in the horse, and that was the first time that I did that. At first I was scared, but then I loved it. It was a fun experience. He took me to my friend's place, and everyone was staring at us. I thanked him, and I hugged him. I met up with my friend, and I charged my phone without wasting time. I told my family that I was okay. They were so worried. Now, I was ready to continue with my vacations with Anna. I just wanted to tell my story because this experience had taught me a lot. It took me back to a time when life was simpler. It made me think about life differently and how simple it is, but we make it so complicated. I admired how grateful that old woman was about life. Even though they had no phones, no cars, they were happy. They were healthy, and that's what mattered.
I am Lisi, and I am only 16-year-old. Months ago, something had happened to my family and me, so I decided to tell my story. Get ready to get goosebumps. I was born and raised in Island. We are one small family, but a happy one. I live with my parents, and I am the only child. My grandparents had passed away very early when I was a baby. But my mom says that I used to love them so much. I often think about them and how life would be if they were still alive. Even though I am big now, my mom still treats me like a baby. But I can't complain, though. I am a mama's boy. When I am home, most of the time I spend with my mother. My mom doesn't work, so she is always home. On the other hand, my father works in Switzerland and he is never home. But it doesn't go an hour that my mom and dad don't text each other. I try as much to stay home with her because I don't want her to feel alone. But it's hard, especially when you are a 16-year-old and your friends are going out and being rebellious. But my parents have sacrificed a lot for me. Staying home with my mother is the least that I can do. When my father isn't home, I feel like I become the father of the house. I think that I must be brave and I must do the most to make my mother feel safe. 5 years ago, we were in a very terrible economic situation. I was a kid, but I remember so much. I remember how stressed my parents were. My father worked different jobs, but he was not getting paid enough. My mother couldn't work because she had to stay home and look after me. We never had vacations, and we never went somewhere fancy. There were times when we could barely find food to eat. I was the only kid at school who would pack lunch, and all the others were going out and eating. There were times that I felt left out. I like to remember the past because I see how much our lives have changed now. A lot has changed in 5 years. Since there weren't many good jobs, my father decided to leave our country and go to Switzerland. The fact that he would be far from us broke his heart. But it was the only solution. I remember how scared my mother was and how she would lock all the doors of our houses all the time. But our city, Jylland, is very safe. We were always safe here. My dad comes to visit us every 3 months. My mom is the happiest when dad is here. We are all happier now. Life is good. We have a roof upon our heads, good food, and warm clothes. These are the most important things, says my mom. But, on the other hand, my dad is different. He is always looking for more. He never settles down. Now that we are in an ideal economic situation, he thinks we should enjoy it and not feel guilty. I am not the type of person who wants expensive stuff, but my dad is. One day, as we talked on FaceTime, he said that he had a surprise for us. Guess what? He had bought a Tesla, a white brand new Tesla. This car was very trendy, and everybody seemed to love it. I have heard about it, and there were times when we would talk with my friends about it. I couldn't believe that my dad had bought it. It is a car that can drive itself. It's insane how far technology has gone. After some weeks, my dad had come, and it was time for me to see the new Tesla. I was speechless. You should be 18-year-old to get your driver's license in my country. I don't have one yet. But, my dad still let me drive it. It felt so good driving the Tesla. My heart was racing, and my legs were shaking. We even tried the option to let the car drive itself. My mother was scared of it. But I loved it. Every time that my dad comes back, we go on vacation. This way we can spend more time together. Plus, it was summer, and I was out of school. This time we decided to go to Helsinki, Montenegro. We had never been there, but people always seemed to love and have a good time there. We didn't care that we didn't know the road, Tesla got our back. It was a very hot day, so we couldn't wait and arrive there and have a cold swim. We didn't waste time. We took some clothes, some food for the road, and decided to start the journey. It was a long road ahead of us. There were times when our dad would put the Tesla on its self-driving mode. His hands would be out of the wheel, but we would still feel safe. We started our journey very late afternoon, and it was beginning to get dark outside. I slept some hours, and when I woke up, it was pitch dark. My mom was asleep too. We were driving and driving. There were no lights, no cars, no humans. We could barely see. There were a lot of mountains, and the road was getting bumpy. At first, we thought we were going on the wrong way, but the GPS told us that that was the right road for our wanted destination. We were looking for a gas station to stop and rest a little, but we couldn't see any. It was summer, but the road was foggy. That was where we started getting worried. At that moment, we were just hoping that the sun would rise, and this way, we would feel safer. We couldn't find any gas station, so we decided to stop the car and just have a little bit of fresh air. We parked the car on the side of the road. My parents were smoking a cigarette and we were just having a conversation. It was so dark. The moon was the only light. The silence was loud. Suddenly, a wild deer comes running so fast towards me. He pushed me to the ground. I was so scared because the deer was so big and it caught me off guard. We couldn't stay outside anymore because we thought they might be other wild animals, which could be dangerous. We got in the car and decided to continue our journey. After some hours, my dad noticed that there weren't any street signs anymore. It had been hours since we had seen a car or a human. We didn't have an internet connection. But, since we had never been there, we thought that this would be the right road. We decided to trust the car, even though the road became harder and harder. We couldn't sleep anymore. We would just stare at the road and see where it would take us. My dad thought that it would be better if we would stop the car and ask for help. But the car wasn't stopping at all. We tried and tried, but the car just drove. We couldn't understand what was happening. We were so stressed. We were trapped inside of our car and we couldn't get out. The car took us inside some big mountains, then it stopped. It was even darker. There was nothing around us. We were left with so little food and we all needed to go to the bathroom, but the door was still locked. We fell asleep that way and then we woke up to the noise of the car starting up. My dad wasn't even touching the wheel anymore at this point. We were in the early minutes of sunrise and now we could see where we were. We were in a big field with nothing around us. The car started driving and driving. Then, it took us to a very strange place. There was a big, scary, abandoned building. The car got parked near there. Then, the doors of the car got opened. It was like the car was communicating with us, telling us to go outside of the car. At this point, we didn't care where we were. We just wanted to get out of the car and be safe. We got out, and I had never felt freer than at that moment. It was early morning. It was silent, and the only thing we could hear was the bird singing. We needed this fresh air. But there was nothing around us except that building. The car closed its doors, and now we were left outside. We didn't know if we would ever get back in our car or if we could ever return home. We thought it would be better if we walked around and asked for help. Maybe someone could be there. We walked around the building, but nothing was there. The building was old and musty. It had a massive door, and we couldn't see what was inside of it. We decided to open the door and find out. We walked in, and we noticed that it was someone's home. But maybe that someone had lived there over 50 years before. The furniture was untouched and full of dust. There was an old, fat television and an old piano. There were still some dirty dishes in the kitchen. The building had 3 floors. And we decided to go and see what was in there. There was a big room with over 20 beds. We thought that this might have been an orphanage. We wanted to see the 3rd floor too, but the stairs were so old and musty we were afraid that we would fall. We decided to go out and see if the doors of the cars got opened. We arrived at the living room and tried to open the door. We couldn't open the door. We were so scared and we didn't know what was going on. We felt like we were on the set of a horror film. As we were trying to figure out how to open the door, we heard the sound of the piano. It was playing itself. That was the moment we realized that this had to be with something abnormal, something out of this world. I don't believe in ghosts, either my parents, but what's the explanation for all the things happening to us? The piano play lasted for 3 good minutes. My body was shaking, not knowing what was going to happen next. Then the piano stopped and we just stayed here in complete silence. Suddenly, we heard some steps, like someone was coming to the living room. But no one was coming downstairs. We were stuck there for an hour, listening and looking around. Then we heard steps like some people were coming downstairs running to the living room. There were no people, no ghosts, just some dust flying around. That's when the door got opened and the dust went outside of the door. We were shocked because it looked like some spirit had just gone outside of the house. My mother was crying. We didn't know if we would be safer inside the house or outside. At that moment, we heard someone honking a car. And we thought that somebody had come to recuse us. But no. Our Tesla was honking at us like calling us to get in the car. We went outside and the car opened the doors. We got in and the car wasn't starting itself like it used to. My dad tried to start it and it did. It looked like we were in charge of the car now. We drove some miles and the GPA was back and we noticed that we were nowhere near our destination. We were back on the streets and we saw cars and people and millions of gas station stops. We didn't know if we should ask for help. What would we say to everyone? We decided to drive home because this whole road trip got too weird. I haven't told anyone this story until now. We still don't know if we will keep the Tesla. My dad's theory of all this happening was that somehow there were old spirits on that abandoned building that needed to be free. We were the chosen ones to do that. Why us, though?
Hi guys, I am Tracy. Please, make my story animated. How freelancing and working online has been pissing me off. Hi guys, I am Tracy, and I recently got into freelancing after losing my freedom. I was born into a family of 4 which were made up of my father, my mother, my brother, and me. My parents were very wealthy people who co-founded a tech company, Zenit. The company was worth an estimated amount of $300 billion and was comfortably seated as number 5 in the top 10 global tech companies. It was said that Rome was not built in a day, and neither was their company. My parents made it mandatory that every staff who worked for them in the company or at home was well acquainted with that fact. Zenit was born out of hard work, self-denial, and persistence, and they were not going to let people who lacked these qualities ruin the company. My dad had a background you would not envy. He never knew his parents because he was left at the doorstep of the orphanage home by an unknown lady. Life seemed unfair to him as the orphanage was no place to raise a proper child. However, fortune smiled on him when at the age of 2, he was adopted by the Freemans. Mr. and Mrs. Freeman had been married for 8 years without a child. They went through every medical procedure available at the time, and it was during one of those procedures that it was discovered that Mr. Freeman was sterile. And his wife, who had suffered from fibroid in the past, now had a damaged womb. The news came as a rude shock to this young couple, but they soon picked themselves up and decided to face life with every ounce of positivity. This led them to the adoption home, where they were soon enchanted by this cute little boy whom no one knew much about. All legal requirements were met, and this 2-year-old boy was taken home. A celebration was made to receive my dad, and people came to congratulate the Freemans. My dad was renamed Trevor by the Freemans, who loved him in no small way. Although the Freemans were not wealthy, they lived a comfortable life. And taking care of my dad was never a problem. Life treated my dad very fine until tragedy struck the Freeman family 3 days to his 18th birthday. The Freemans were returning from a picnic when they were robbed at gunpoint. The robbers equally made away with their life, and my dad, who was with them, sustained 2 gunshots to the chest. Luckily, he survived but had now become orphaned once again. My dad, who was now 18 years of age, couldn't go back to the orphanage, and so, he began life as an independent adult. The Freemans left only enough to see him through high school, and so he had to take up several odd jobs in college just to make ends meet. It was while he worked as a cleaner in a restaurant that he met Patricia, the woman who would be his future wife. Patricia was a young, industrious woman who was getting set for college. She had parents who could fund the bills, but she wanted to gain financial independence from her parents, so she resorted to taking several jobs to generate money. She was a worker in the same restaurant as a dad, but Dad had been employed before she came seeking employment. Dad was assigned to teach them how to handle certain equipment, but it turned out she was no learner as she had already worked 3 jobs before then. It was during this time that learned that my dad was already in the college which she was preparing to attend. This further drew them together, and they soon found themselves falling for each other. Dad was the first to make the move. He was thrilled by the fact that Mom, who had parents who could foot her college bills, still chose to work. She was different from other ladies. One time when she was cleaning the storage room, she tripped over a bucket and was headed straight for the floor. But Daddy's timely intervention saved the day. He had caught her before she could hit the floor, and while she was still searching for the words to say thank you, he quickly rewarded himself with a kiss. The kiss was all the trigger she needed as she immediately pulled him close and started reaching for his buttons. She cared less if someone walked. Dad had lit a flame in her which needed to be put out. This was the birth of something that would last for a lifetime. Their relationship blossomed. Mummy often supported Dad with the little savings she made. While she was a freshman in college, Dad was a year ahead of her. But it was not an issue. Although they lived apart, she would sometimes spend the weekend at his place, so he could assist her with some school work. They inspired each other, but I think Mom inspired him more. She was always thinking ahead. It was in Dad's final year after the school failed at the implementation of digitized courses that she suggested they start up a technological firm that would offer both hardware and software solutions to individuals and firms. Although this idea had great potential, they both knew it required the kind of capital that they didn't have, but were determined to try. All the same, so while Dad graduated and sought funds, a Mom who was now in her finals drafted up the structure of the organization. Upon Mom's graduation, Daddy proposed, and 6 months later they were married on a very simple occasion. Having made their union official, they resolved all the more to make sure that they succeeded. This made them take the decision not to have children until certain things were put in place. For a company that was just in its infancy and lacked a physical location, they found it very difficult getting clients even though the competition was very little. They made and distributed business cards that only drained the little capital at hand. They tendered business proposals that were meant to create partnerships with several institutions, only to be turned down over and over again. Their breakthrough finally came when a friend of her dad who ran a private college institution needed some supplies and installation. This marked a turning point in their career, and they have consistently worked at the development of the firm. 3 years after their first major business deal, Mom and Dad decided it was time to make babies, and upon their first trial, they had twins. My brother and I, that was all the kids they were willing to have. My brother took after my parents. He always sought independence from infancy. He would rarely allow anything done for him even though we had staff at home who were there to attend to our needs. This greatly pleased my parents. They saw his attitude as a statement that he didn't take their efforts for granted. My mom saw much of her in him. She knew this boy could survive even without his parents' wealth and influence. I, on the other hand, gave them great concern. I was the direct opposite of my brother, and who it was that I had taken after, they couldn't tell. My parents were both hard workers who never allowed their wealth to negatively affect the way they related with people. So they couldn't understand whose gene flowed in me. I was the definition of laziness. Over time, I had perfected the art of laziness that if you didn't want something done, just give it to me. I enjoyed the privileges I had. I was bossy to the staff around, and I loved doing my thing in my own time, which I never had because I was busy doing nothing. If I had my way, I would compel someone to spoon-feed me, bathe, and clothe me. The only relief my parents had was the knowledge that I wasn't too lazy to breathe. Yeah, it was that bad. Unlike my brother, I always exhausted my monthly allowance before the week ran out. My grades were not so bad. At least they were not the worst in class, but neither were they as good as that of my brother, who always came top of the class. At 16, we were both in our final year in high school, and our parents were throwing a party to celebrate the company's 20th anniversary. Several renowned people in the society would be there. Top politicians were among the special guests of honor. It was a week before the party that our parents informed my brother and me that we would be given the opportunity to each present a 20-minute speech before everyone present. This speech would feature which career path we had chosen, and how it would directly or indirectly influence the growth of the company. They, however, failed to inform us that the audience would be allowed to ask us questions based on what we had said. It was a day I didn't look forward to, but I knew that I wasn't ready to have my monthly allowance denied me because I let my parents down. The day finally arrived. As expected, it was colorful and everything was put in place to ensure that the event went according to plan. As expected, the high and mighty were there. The anniversary was being aired live, and so everyone was expected to be their best. Things moved smoothly until it was time for the children of the founders of the company to make their speech. We had to submit our written speeches 15 minutes before we were called up to make them so that they could be duplicated and distributed to the guests. My brother was up first. He said he had long decided to take a career path in software programming, so that way, he could work in the company, become directly involved in writing software programs which the company could sell to generate funds. As expected, there was applause from the crowd, and a guest asked what inspired him to take a path in line with the family business. We all listened as he said that he got passionate about the family business over time as he saw how dedicated my parents were towards the growth of the company. This inspired him to take steps that would prolong the legacy of the family long after my parents were gone. This response further evoked applause from the crowd. You could see my parents swelling with pride. It was now my turn to impress everyone, especially my parents. My brother had made them proud so many times, and I was prepared to make this my first. And the world who were watching would see just how great the kids of the great tech company were. I started my speech by telling them that the company which they had gathered to celebrate was not just founded as a means out of poverty, but its primary aim has always been to make humanity better, bring us closer, and then make life easier. CANT was founded to bring a digital solution to the digital problems, both hardware and software which existed then and still does now. I made them understand that money was just a byproduct of the solution, and that's why CANT had made so much of it even though it was never the chief aim. I further stated that my choice of career did not stem from the desire to amass wealth, but it came from the philosophy of my parents' company, which was to bring solution in every legitimate means possible to every aspect where humanity greatly suffered, which was why I would be going into politics. And although it had no direct relation to the family business, I was going to help defend the interest of citizens, thereby creating a legacy which had its roots in my parents' legacy. And whenever I am spoken of, people will agree that I was the personified legacy of my parents in the government. I marveled at the things I said, but my parents were more stunned. This was a part of me that they had never seen, thought about, or dreamt of. They didn't seem to mind the fact that I had just told the world that I wasn't going to be directly involved in their business. What mattered to them was the fact that I was going to use my life for something meaningful and productive. I never saw coming what happened next. A standing ovation from everyone almost led to my collapse. I never knew I could say what I had just said. This was my moment of glory, and I was going to bask in it. After the applause had died down, the wife of a serving senator asked a question. She wanted to know why a freelancing company was thanking me for patronizing them and hoped to do business with me again. I felt stupid. I was stupid. I had employed the services of a freelancer to help me prepare a script, and when it was delivered to me through my email, I just printed it out. I had about a week to go through it, but I was too lazy to do so, otherwise I would have noticed the message of gratitude at the bottom right of the paper. I bowed my head in shame as I walked off the platform, and made straight for my room. I had embarrassed my family in front of the whole world. How my parents handled the rest of the night I could not tell, but I know that the party ended rather quickly. And on a sad note too. The next day, newspaper headlines and television channels made matters worse. It was a field day for journalists, who were paid by rival companies to spread the news that the daughter of the giant tech firm called Zenit was a scam. My parents' company temporarily lost investors at a fast pace. The company's board of trustees was made up of 6 shareholders. My dad, my mom, Mr. Jack, Mr. Kent, Mr. Roberts, and Mr. McCarthy. My dad had 20% shares, my mom had 20%, and the rest of the board members each had 15% shares. Mr. Jack had been a shareholder in the company for over a decade. He was in my dad's class back in school, and they both graduated the same year. He initially ventured into the same line of business when he saw how the company was making rapid progress. His startup company did well at the initial phase because he had the means to raise the capital needed at its inception and few human connections, which gave him little influence. However, my parents' company had already established its own presence in the market, and it soon became very clear to Mr. Jack that his company lacked what it took to make it. While realizing that his company was on the verge of collapse, he then decided to approach my parents for a merger. My parents accepted the merger, but it only got him a 15% stake in the company. That way, his clients became that of the company, and it further led to the growth of the company. He became disturbed when investors began pulling out in droves. Mr. Kent was a multi-millionaire who initially made most of his wealth from agriculture. Agriculture was his life. He was deeply committed to farming that he saw marriage as a distraction. Although he wasn't married, he had a son from a harlot, and he raised him on the farm, in the hopes that he would take over someday. He had various ranches scattered all over the country. He was strategic about his business, and he only made friendships that greatly favored his business. He became a shareholder in Zenit 5 years ago, so he could use the income generated to further invest in his agricultural business. As you would guess, he found the thought of losing investors a hard pill to swallow. Mr. Roberts was fondly called Rob, and as it suggests, he was a robber. Mr. Roberts was a gambler who owned a popular casino that was situated in almost every state in the country. Sought opportunities in everything. He offered help only when saw an opportunity to exploit. He never put his money where there was no chance of multiple returns. He has been a shareholder with the company for 5 years simply because he saw it as good business. As a gambler, he knew it was time to pull out when the company started losing investors. As for Mr. Mackenzie, he had been with the company for over 15 years. He was not just a shareholder, but he was a staff at the company who genuinely wanted the success of the company. He was one person my parents always appreciated having around because of his sincerity and integrity. He had a real estate company he co-founded with his wife, but he left her to manage it while he worked for my parents at Zenit. He was the only one who was concerned not just for the money and investors who were leaving, but for my parents' legacy too. It was his concern for the company that made him call the attention of my parents to the fact that the other investors were thinking of selling their shares to the chairman of the company's rival. Mr. Pablo founded a rival company called Apex. He was a man who was known to delve into every kind of business that brought in money, and it didn't matter how. Rumors had it that his tech company called Apex was only an umbrella that covered his dirty line of businesses that gave him the major part of his wealth. He was rumored to be into drugs, human trafficking, and every kind of illicit business you could think of. He always found a way to evade the law. He was a 3-time divorcee who was repeatedly accused of domestic violence. He had children that he couldn't account for. His hatred for my family and our company began 5 years ago when a client whom he had supplied inferior products to had he taken to court, and the client ended up seeking my dad's services. Mr. Pablo claimed that my dad was responsible for everything, and ever since he constantly sought ways to get back at us. He finally got his opportunity when I messed up, and he tried buying the shares of the major stakeholders of my father's company. So that way, he could take over our company. When my parents learned that Mr. Rob had already sold his share to Mr. Pablo, my dad quickly bought that of Mr. Kent, while my mom bought that of Mr. Jack. This quickly aborted the plan of Mr. Pablo, who would have to wait till when next I opened another window of opportunity. It was 3 weeks later, after my dad had sued the journalists who had spread the lies about my parents trying to use their kids to manipulate people into investing in the company, that they confessed to being paid by no other than the Apex chairman, Mr. Pablo. My dad wasted no time in taking him to court, and it was then all the terrible deeds he had been involved in began coming to light. Families and individuals who couldn't get justice in the past against Mr. Pablo were now coming forth to testify against him with heartbreaking evidence. There was no escaping from Mr. Pablo this time around. The judge ruled against him. He was sentenced to life in prison and made to forfeit all his assets to the government, who will use them to compensate his victims. The court equally ruled that the shares he had bought in our company will be forfeited to the company, who would then distribute it to its shareholders. There was a buzz in the whole country. The next day, newspapers carried the headlines, "The apex predator is gone." They labeled my family as the heroes of society, who helped the voiceless masses get justice. Some said that it was the window of opportunity that I created that led to the downfall of Mr. Pablo. This caused investors to rush back in, and they were so much that the company had to turn down hundreds of them. In the space of 2 months, the company witnesses a 300% growth. It was clear I had almost ruined their legacy. They ignored me for the period when they were trying to clear my mess while thinking about the kind of punishment I deserved. I knew an apology would do no good, as I had apologized too many times without making a change, so I patiently waited for the inevitable. My punishment, and came in a way I never expected. I had the staff assigned to me all withdrawn from me permanently. My allowance was off. I had to eat whatever was on the menu for that day. To crown it all, I had to take up a freelancing job in writing. The very thing I had used to embarrass the family. I was made to undergo a 2-month writing course, so I could be taught what I needed to know about writing articles, scripts, speeches, and whatever it was that I would be writing. 2 months went rather fast, and I was now ushered into a world of excruciating torture and pain. Yes, work for me was torture and pain. Since it was a freelancing job, I was made to work from home. That way, I was constantly monitored. There was just no escaping it. I could only spend the money I earned. No sooner had I begun before I discovered how difficult freelancing was, especially when you were working remotely. I had a hard time getting hired even though I joined multiple freelancing platforms. In every platform I joined, there were already professionals who had years of experience and a very attractive portfolio, so clients would always choose them over one who was a novice and just starting. It took me about 3 months before I was eventually contacted by a prospective client who backed out after stating that I lacked the needed experience to handle his project. The next prospective client who almost awarded me his contract became skeptical after she checked my profile and discovered that I was the infamous daughter of the owners of Zenit. It was frustrating. Really, really frustrating. I got lucky when a 14-year-old student contacted me. He wanted me to write a 10,000-word essay on a topic that I was needed to research before I could write it. I was ecstatic. I knew I had hit a gold mine. A 10,000-word essay was going to pay me just enough money to enjoy a bit of luxury. It had been almost 6 months since I last spent money the way I wanted, but after this gig, I knew things would temporarily get better. He needed it in about a week, and even though I never saw the possibility of having it ready in 2 weeks, I wasn't going to watch this money pass me by. So I told him I could have it ready then. I got mad when he told me that he was only able to pay $10. $10? What in the world would I do with $10? When I was still on a monthly allowance, I had usually spent $200 in a day. And yet it wasn't even enough. How can I now spend 7 days working just for $10? I quickly ended the conversation. I was now very frustrated. It had been a while since I last spent money on myself. I couldn't go to my brother for help as he was already forbidden from giving me money or helping me out with my work. Out of desperation, I quickly accepted an offer of $30 from a client who wanted a 20,000-word essay on global warming. He needed it in 4 days and demanded that I sent him the progress at the end of each day. I had always hated routine, but for the sake of $30, I had to keep up. I never liked being bossed around. No, I was used to giving orders. This new development was one that I wasn't going to get used to anytime soon. It took me an additional 3-day period to complete the project, but on the 7th day, I discovered that he had already requested that the platform call off the contract, which was in escrow, due to my inability to meet up on the 4th day. I had just wasted 7 days of my time, and I could not take it anymore. By my own estimation, I had suffered enough. I knew that the only way out of this was if my parents lifted the ban. My family had regained the love respect, and admiration of the masses because the apex predator was now behind bars where he would be spending the rest of his life. And I had a part in that. I thought it was only fitting that my parents restored my lost glory. I made up my mind to speak to them about it for the first time since I began serving punishment. I hadn't bothered pleading with them when they dished out my punishment, because I knew I had messed up, and felt guilty about it. But all I felt now was frustration and more frustration, so I decided to speak to plead with my parents. I walked up to them immediately after they got back from work. I had barely begun stating my frustration when the tears rose from within me. Although you could barely hear what I was saying as my words were now mixed with tears. My mom and daddy perfectly understood the situation. But to my amazement, they just stood there smiling. They didn't show any sign of sympathy. It seemed as though they enjoyed my misery. Well, I guess they would because I had caused misery too. I was only getting served with what I deserved. When I discovered that I had not allowed them to say something yet, I quit talking but continued sobbing. By now, I had already created a scene, and the whole staff in the house just watched and enjoyed the drama. I knew that they would be glad to see me cry. After all, I had made life almost unbearable for them all. Each one of them had a tale of woe that I had scripted. Finally, my dad said that there were various reasons for their decision, and the very first was to make me understand that in life, actions would always have consequences. The ban placed on me was to make me finally appreciate those around me who helped me in one way or the other. It would finally cause me to value money, and watch how I spend it since I would only have what I had worked for. Finally, the ban would make me rise beyond laziness, and get things done for myself. It was at this point that he then said that the ban would remain in force. No more monthly allowance for me till I got into college, and no staff will be reassigned to me even after I got out of college. I fell to the ground, crying as they both walked past me. Hey guys, what would you do if you were me? What would you do when you realize that you have lost your privileges because of laziness? What steps do you think I should take to change the minds of my parents?
I am 17 and I hate people asking me if I am a virgin. Hi, I am Phil. I am just 17 and I had been staying with my cousin Luke for some weeks now. Before now, I had never met Luke in person. I have only had a couple of virtual chats with me. Before now, to be frank, I was only called upon to say hi on those encounters. Before now, he and my mum are so close, those two are something. Before now, I once thought, there is something fetish going on between those two. Before now, I haven't written that off yet. Before now, I don't trust my mum with men, and I am still yet to catch her with one. It is wrong of me to say my mum is cheating. On who exactly? She is a single mother. She has every reason to be dug by different kinds of men. Before now, she won't be breaking anyone's heart if she does that, but I am yet to see a man knock at the door except the mailman. Before now, it can't be him, he looked gay, and he is gay. On his visits, he looked at me instead of my mum. Before now, that man is something else. The mailman is a tall dark guy. Before now, he once told me he is a Belgian but came from a strong background of Congolese. Before now, my mum has black men's frames in her room but I doubt she was ever interested in one. Not even Mr. Christoph, our neighbor, and the only black man with the German accent I have ever seen in my all life. His daughter, Anna, is not black. Before now, initially, I thought Mr. Christoph adopted Anna, but she is his actual daughter. Anna and I are quite close, but nothing intimate was going on between us. I am not comfortable with girls. I haven't approached one my whole life. Before now, everyone in our neighborhood knew I am a virgin. I guess that was why my mum asked Luke to come and pick me. We talked about this, but for the first time in like forever. My mum wanted her to wish to come to pass. I can recall Anna telling me that her grandfather met a South African lady on his expenditure to Africa. The end product of what happened between the two is her father. Before now, Mr. Christoph is a single parent just like my mum, but he had never knocked at us. Not for once. Before now, he is a busy person, which gave Anna the privilege to invite several classmates to her place. Especially the male gender. Her room is opposite mine, and I do watch on her from my window. Before now, I got a binocular for this purpose just to gaze and fantasize about her figure. To be candid, I love watching her make love with the other guys that came visiting. Before now, according to my research, the standard time for sexual intercourse is 15 minutes, but this girl came last more than an hour. Before now, once a guy is done, she gets another in. Sometimes age rocks 2, 3 guys at the same time. I guessed she found out, but she had never mentioned it. Before now, she never asked me to come to see her in her room too. Before now, she once told me, you're the most real guy in my life. That doesn't sound like I am interested in you. She preferred the friendship, but I can't say I do. Due to watching her, I started jerking off. Before now, I imagined her and stroked my penile muscle. Before now, my commonest commodity was now toilet rolls. On the stall one day, the salesgirl was looking at me with a weird face because all I came to buy were toilet rolls. They're my mum's, I said. She scoffed. Over time, I realized watching Anna do her thing is toxic to me. So I ceased looking at her, but I couldn't control the huge again. My head kept looking for holes to dig. Before now, I had now become an addict. Who will set me free from this? Before now, I didn't tell my mum about it, but she surely knows. She might not know how I got sensitized into doing it, but she knew how I started. Before now, if you also think it was Anna's shape and curves that caused it, you're also wrong. I can't say this is what he does for a living, but Luke knows how to get a party started. Before now, since we had been living together, we had grown to understand ourselves over the weeks. Before now, Luke isn't all bad. He is a good person to be with, but not for me at this time. Before now, Luke has so many acquaintances but not a single friend. I wonder how he does that. Before now, he will always say, don't get too close to people. Once they're close, they will get the edge over you. It still doesn't make any sense to me to date. Living with Luke at the beachside is an idea. I can't tell if it is a good one or a bad one. Our relationship is kind of toxic to me, but Mum said that is what I need for now. Before now, all my life, I had lived with my mum until now. She had never seen anything wrong with me staying with her until when I finished high school. You need to stay with a man to understand what men are built for before you finally go to college, she would say. Here I am, living my mum's dream for me. Before now, I kind of like the idea now. I am the newest guy in town in the city of no shame. Before now, it is normal to go in public and hit a lady's buttocks cheeks, or even go ahead to squeeze them, without anyone bringing up harassment as a topic. Before now, the guys in this new environment don't have any other thing they do. All they look for is to hit their waist hard on some soft buttocks, and the ladies just want to ride the guys. Things seem balanced here. Everyone knows what the other person wants and they are ready to give it to each other. Before now, this is the only society where no one has any reason to rape. Before now, if a lady turns you down, another will give herself to you without you asking. Before, it was difficult for me to adjust to how things work here. Before now, all my life before now, a guy had to approach a lady and so some talking, and then she might give him what he wanted or not. That's normal. At least not all guys that talked to Anna ended up on her bed, but most did. That's for sure. But here, all you have to do is go straight to the point. If you are that good, you can get up to 5 ladies before the end of the day. Being a virgin is not a virtue here, to live in this community. You need to get laid. Before now, when I entered, I was the only virgin I know of. Before now, not even Gina, the bartender's daughter. She's just 15 and she's pro in her league. If she hadn't handled me, I would not have believed myself. She is good with her mouth and her throat is so stretchable. Before now, she even swallows the whole thing and thank you for it. What a polite girl. After just a week of staying at the beachside with Luke, I had already forgotten about Anna. Don't blame me, you would have done the same too. Before now, I have so many girls to fantasize with. Before now, I am always hard all day, even while I sleep. I can't get my head off what I am seeing everywhere. Before now, nothing is hidden here, you can just look out from the window and start releasing. Before now, I don't have to stroke myself anymore. Here the imagination is real. While I was still with my mum, watching Anna wasn't enough for me anymore. Before now, I started visiting the web to watch videos. Before now, this made me jerk off so many times a day. Before now, my mum noticed but saw it as the norm and Bever made a fuss out of it. Before now, she didn't discourage the habit, neither did she encourage it. Before now, that had become my new hobby. She would enter my room, find me at the moment. And yet, excuse me, before now, I became so popular on one of those sites that they started sending videos to my emails. Instead of this to cure my urge, it increased it. I don't know the reason for that. It was me all the way. Before now, I love the opposite sex more than I love myself. I could recall vividly that as a small child I watched romantic movies with Mum and she always allowed me to cuddle her. Before now, she didn't see anything wrong with me watching those movies with her. I got fond of those types of movies, which I made sure are the only kind of movies we have at home. While my mates at school got intrigued by action, thriller, fictional and animated movies, all that got my attention was romantic movies. Before now, while still a small boy, I had started looking at the girls in such a tempting way. Before now, I see beyond their clothes while just looking at them. Maybe that's the reason I didn't do well in my academics. Before now, that was what led me to peep at Anna. The girl is innocent of my crimes, I am the culprit of my predicaments. At Luke's place, there is no television or internet. Before now, I cannot remember the last time I used Facebook. All he does is the club from the sunrise to the sunset. Before now, I didn't know Luke so much before now. My mum spoke highly of him on things that doesn't matter. Before now, sometimes I thought my mum had been having intimate affairs with his nephew. Before now, but this is not feasible either. Luke lives thousands of miles away and mum never lives home. She is an artist and she had transformed the garage into her workshop. She only goes to the stores to buy groceries. Before now, the other place she visits that often is the art stores to buy her pieces of equipment. To be frank, she's good at what she does and her imagination is wild. Do you remember the frames of the black men painting in her room? Those were his drawing. People love her paintings and she had attracted so many customers for herself. Before now, she is talented, she deserves the credit. Before now, when I was younger I had also had an interest in artistry. Before now, I started drawing with crayons and color sticks. Before now, my mum will frame my little paintings. Funny enough, people bought them, not just young kids like me. But the elderly ones also find them attractive. Now, I am a good painter myself. Before now, I single-handedly made the designs of my high school since I had been in the 8th grade. Before now, I had participated in a few competitions myself and won some medals for myself. I have an online page where I use my creativity for money. Before now, my brain was doing things the right way before Anna stepped into the story. Before now, I am not proud of the day I met her. I left my goal and started chasing after fables. Is she to be blamed? Before now, no, it was all me and I hold myself responsible. I had learned graffiti by the way. Before now, it is more fun painting on the walls with some color sprays. My mum did not buy this idea, since I had changed the whole wall to something else. Most teenagers stop by at our walls to take a few shots. Before now, but this time, my mum was not so proud of me. She said I had a child's imagination. Before now, according to her, paintings don't just depict the painter's imagination. It also describes the painter's mind. Before now, I wonder what my mind looks like. My mum is fond of speaking mysteries. Before now, her idioms looked as if they would make sense but made no sense eventually. Before now, she laughs at me whenever I showed her weird faces. She would say as my mind developed, I would understand them. Before now, these days, when I recall her idioms, I smile, they now make sense. I asked Luke about his girlfriend. Before now, he has not shown me one. Before now, and he had shared the bed with nothing less than 15 ladies since I have been with him. Before now, some had come here more than once. He is terrible. I barely sleep at night and there is nothing to distract me. Before now, no TV and no internet. Since my arrival, all they do here is to party in the afternoon and club at night. Most people come here for holidays. In my few last weeks, I have seen several faces already. Before now, Luke once told me, you might not remember the face but don't forget these two things. 1, the backside, and 2, how you were rocked. Before now, I wonder what that means. Before now, the other few here work around. It is either they work at the beach as instructors or as safeguards or they work in bars, grocery stores, salons, music stores, and other necessities stores. Before now, nothing much happens where outside the holidays. Luke has a great connection with one of the bar owners. Before now, he is not the manager nor the bartender but does all those things and gets paid for it. Before now, he is the symbol of attraction at the bar and almost everybody knows him. Before now, it was as if he has been here his whole life. Before now, I heard he graduated college a year ago. Is he not supposed to be working with a white collar? Before now, I am not a fan of Luke but he is good with ladies, to be frank. When I got to his place, I made it clear that I was asked to come to live with him, so that I can find my path. He laughed scornfully as if I had spit on his face. He told me, you are here to learn how it works in college. How it works in college. He drew a calendar of 30 days with me and told me to summarize my day by drawing out symbols on the space provided. I slept throughout the first few days, then I saw Gina. Before now, she offered to suck me. Before now, I was amazed. What can this little girl do? Before now, she asked me to come to the restroom. I followed, and she gave me my wildest experience until that day. Before now, I had never been sucked before. Before now, but, as far as I can feel it, little Gina is not a novice in the game. Before now, she told me, she keeps numbers and her goal is to reach 1,000 before she graduates high school. Before now, I will soon reach my mark, she told me. Before now, I wonder what number I am on her list. After Gina, I had met several ladies. Before now, I had unbuckled my belt in bed than I had in the restroom. Before now, I am no more the little good boy that I used to be. Things had changed now. Before now, I was trying to regain my interest in art and paintings when Luke showed up, but instead, I have gone wild. I still paint today, even with a greater mind. Before now, but all I paint now are images of women who had gone naked in front of me. Everything has its own ups and downs, but now I could not tell if I am enjoying life or I am wasting my talent. Before now, I do not know right from wrong anymore. Before now, I just wanted to live this life and enjoy every bit of it. Before now, Luke is very good at persuading people to do things they don't plan to. I guess that was the reason he is so close with the bar owner. Before now, he studied psychology in college. He is a good student according to what his parent had told my mum over the phone. Before now, he is not using this knowledge right as far as I am concerned. He is so good at understanding and predicting people, which has won him so much luxury and fame. Before now, to be truthful here, he is not a good mentor. Before now, I had spent more than a month at his place and he has never mentioned anything about his career nor has he said anything concerning mine. What is he doing with his bachelor's degree? Before now, he gets paid for doing things I would do for free and get laid all night. Little did I know that Luke had been conversing with my mum on phone telling him about my progress. Before now, my mum's plan for me is to live it wild before going to college. Why will she do that? She told me herself when she called as she usually does. Before now, that fateful day, she asked me the most unexpected question. Who is Gina? Before now, I was stunned. Before now, who is Gina? I rebelled. Before now, don't be naughty, she rejoined. Before now, how did you know about Gina? Before now, I asked. Luke told me about Gina. Luke had told me about everything, she replied, and Gina seemed to be the interesting character in his stories. Before now, so Luke was not just giving me tips on how to reach for a girl's panties, he is also updating my mum about the progress I had made. Okay, I explained to her how Gina and I met and our journey so far. Before now, I made her realize that I was not proud of it. Before now, Gina is 2 years and a few weeks younger than me. Before now, I felt like I had taken advantage of her. That doesn't sound true. Before now, I promised my mum that I would not try that with a little girl anymore. Never. Before now, she laughed. It was so obvious that it was fake. Before now, she then said, to get the actual target, the vulnerable must be used. It was like she didn't get what was going on. Before now, I was not the hunter here. To be frank, I was the one been hunted. Before now, Gina with all her skills and experience could not be vulnerable. I am. Before now, I had been every lady's prey since I got here. People don't care if I enjoyed it or not anymore. They just wanted to satisfy their urge. Before now, no one knew. I didn't have so much experience myself. The only ones I had were Anna's and her dolls and the web. Before now, I haven't even dug a lady before. Before now, that was the reason my mum asked me to come to live with Luke. I don't know much, but I guess she is tired of picking my wet and sticky toilet rolls from the floor. Before now, she wanted me to stop fantasizing and start the real thing. Before now, I remember her asking me if I now know the difference. Before now, I told her that I still haven't found out yet. Getting laid, sucked, and licked is common here and everyone except me to all I know had 3 out of 3. Before now, for me, getting sucked is okay. Within just a few weeks, I had squeezed more lemons than the actual ones and sucked on them that a newborn baby would have. Before now, I have a likeness for the big and saggy ones, and here sag ones are not something to be ashamed about. Before now, the saggier it is the better the experience. Before now, I had gotten so many ladies disappointed for not reaching for their holes. Before now, but I am determined to keep my virginity. Before now, I am a Christian and I don't want to cross the line, that is if I haven't already. Anna had been calling me of recent, remembered. She said I was her favorite opposite sex. Before now, this had started recurring to me. Before now, was she asking to make up with me. Before now, she told me things that did not concern me a bit. She told me she would be going to Namibia to learn the ways of her ancestry route. Before now, yes, we aren't that close for me to know your plans. Before now, we had never talked about what she would love to become. All we talk about are assignments and school activities. I begin to wonder if she had an interest in me. Before now, maybe she purposely let me look at her from the window. Before now, she should have just said it in common words. Before now, I don't understand signs and idioms. My mum tried it with me and she failed. She spoke at length this time around even though we are miles away. Before now, she told me of how her mother died of breast cancer when she was just 5 years of age. Before now, she told me that her father is a German. I never knew he is a pharmacologist until now. Before now, she told me about her first sex with a grown-up man. Before now, she told me all her experiences. Before now, it was a pitiful experience. Before now, I don't know why she is this open, but I am not interested in getting laid if that is what she wants. Before now, the calls kept calling but I had never called her back, not once. Before now, don't judge me, I was being careful. Luke is a fan of inviting friends over after party. Before now, my first morning at his place, he he hosted a party for me. Before now, he said the party was for me but I was not included at all. Before now, all the balloons and strips had my names on them, but I was not in the center of the party. Before now, no one noticed me. Before now, I was shocked at such a welcome party. I left the living room for my room after Luke introduced me and no one noticed my absence. Before now, I peeped through the door hole and I saw all sorts of styles going on. Before now, the music was loud but no one was dancing to the beat. Everyone was digging, squeezing, or hitting someone. Wow, such a party on my behalf. Afterward, Luke would just invite his friends for a few shots. Before now, they chat and I am permitted to join in their discussion. Before now, they talked about business, cars, places, famous individuals but mostly girls. I like this kind of chat. Before now, later, when they found out about my painting, art was included in the discussion. The interest was minute, but I appreciated it. Yesterday, Luke and his friends were at our place. Before now, we talked for a while before John asked if I am still a virgin. I was surprised by that question. Before now, it stunned me. I don't know the correct answer to give. Before now, was I even a virgin before coming here? Before now, what is the New Age definition of a virgin? I tried to wave off the topic and Luke helped me in succeeding with that. Before now, we talked about Luke's sex life instead. Before now, I said so much about himself, I guessed he was trying to drive them away from me as much as possible. Before now, I appreciated what he did for me. I thanked him later and he gave me a big hug. It is well, he said to me. But come to think of it, that wasn't the first time someone would ask me if I was a virgin. Before now, Gina was the first to ask me. I told her I can't say but I haven't gotten laid yet. Before now, she laughed and I allowed her to laugh all as she could. Before now, I didn't stop her, she told me my secret is safe with her. Before now, another lady whose name I can't recall. Before now, I don't even think she knew me too. Before now, she was not the courteous type, she just wanted to get to the business. Before now, after the foreplay and series of sucking and stroking, she wanted me to go all the way down. Before now, I refused, she asked me the same question but I refused to respond. Before now, she got irritated and left, I never saw her again. Before now, I had encountered more of these misfit questions throughout my stay with Luke. Before now, I didn't tell Luke about it, but the rumor reached him. Before now, here, no one cared about your name. Before now, so, they referred to me as Luke's cousin. Before now, I spoiled Luke's face which is bad for business but Luke was fine with it. Before now, am I still a virgin? Before now, I wish to know your thoughts on this.